just growth case.
So you're at a rally, you're talking with another supporter. When somebody asked, why is Bitcoin good for America, what's your response?
Well, then, personally, I would say, it's digital property. We're a great nation because we have two wonderful oceans surrounding our large landmass. The world's digital now. If we can hold the hardest digital asset in the world, and have that digital property, we could be even a stronger nation. And think about, Louisiana Purchase. We got more property for our country than ever before. That worked out well for us. The Alaskan Purchase, we got Alaska. They traded these paper assets for a hard asset, property, and it made our country stronger. But then everything that just was built off of that, all the rails, the transcontinental railroad, the intercontinental highway system, all those things that were able to flourish because we had that. Things that we can't even probably think about right now could benefit our country just by having that asset. And being global, our world's smaller on a digital scale. So yeah, I think Bitcoin itself is just something that's going to continue to grow in adoption, and hopefully, our nation gets on board.
We're wrapping up here a little bit. We're talking, of course, about your strategy for talking to Trump supporters, the messaging you're sending. What message do you hope the former president sends today at this conference when he takes the stage at 2 p.m.?
Boy, that's a great question. I wish I had the answer right now. But
if you're writing Donald Trump's speech as a Bitcoiner and a patriot, what do you hope he says?
Boy, I would love to see it as a reserve asset. I don't. So if we can get it as a reserve asset like gold or a strategic reserve like oil, I think at that point moving forward, it's going to solidify its use case, and just like the ETF solidified, its durability and its staying power. I think when you have the former president and likely, hopefully, the next president talking about it, it'll solidify it that much more. And I think once we get started on it, at least there's a position that the door's open, the foot's in the door, so that way, whoever
Over the course of the past 2 days and into this afternoon, we're going to hear about a lot of executive orders or proposals for executive orders. But I know that there's some bipartisan legislation that has popped up from time to time in Congress. How far are we away, in your mind, of getting something passed that is actually a bipartisan approach, sensible regulation, and some sort of term defining that everybody can agree with and knows what the rules of the game are? How far away are we from that?
Well, I've supported two bipartisan pieces of legislation. One, a Republican bill by Patrick McHenry, FIT 21, that applies not just to Bitcoin, but to all cryptocurrencies, to say that we need regulatory clarity. We need to say what the SEC can do, what the CFTC can do, and we need to make sure that the software developers aren't caught up in being penalized. And that passed with 70 plus Democrats in the House. We now need it to pass the Senate. And I voted to overturn SAB 121. I don't know how many folks followed it, but that would basically make it hard for banks to hold Bitcoin because they'd have to show it as a liability. They don't have to do that with any other asset class. And so I was one of 20-some Democrats who said, no, we don't, SAB 121 doesn't make sense, and I voted to actually overturn the president's veto of that.
Right, great, yeah. I think people here are paying attention to that, for sure. Congressman Khanna, earlier this month you hosted a crypto roundtable where you invited industry leaders and other politicians from the left And I want to get your read on that. How did that, what was the motivation behind you doing that, and what was the intention, and how did that go?
Well, it was that America shouldn't rest in on its laurels. We have the best financial system in the world, and so sometimes we don't appreciate how important Bitcoin is in other parts of the world. There are many other countries which have currency that's inflating. The dollar is a great currency still. So we don't have as much of a need, but there are other countries that do have a desperate need for it. And they have a desperate need because of authoritarian governments. But if we don't have Bitcoin, if we don't have cryptocurrencies, we're going to cede leadership in the financial innovation of the 21st century. Why would we do that? Why? We need to be the leaders. This is a payment that's going to be cheaper. It's going to be faster. It's going to have the ability to move a few cents across the world without the fees. It's going to make us more connected in a global society. I mean, all the Democrats who preach that we don't want to be isolationists, well, isn't rejecting cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin being isolationist because the rest of the world is using it?
Absolutely.
So this is actually connecting to the rest of the world. So the conference was saying, let America lead when it comes to the instruments of financial innovation. And you have the Fed payment now, FedNow, and you have Zelle with the banks. I don't want a monopoly of the Fed and the banks deciding how to have instantaneous payments. Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies are competitive alternatives so that we don't have monopoly power. I thought the Democrats were opposed to monopoly power.
Me too. That's great. So as we look forward, there's a lot of people in the Bitcoin space who claim to be single issue voters, and I'm not one of them. I'm infamously not one of them. There's other things I care about. So if I go to your website, there's a lot of policies that you and I agree on, but a lot of the other Democrats where I look and I don't see things that I agree with everything else except for their Bitcoin or crypto policy. How do we get more people at the grassroots level energized or talking to their representatives to actually get that message to go from the bottom up to say, we can't keep voting for you if you have these damaging policies on crypto or Bitcoin? How does that happen in your vision of it?
Well, make your voice heard. I know Bitcoiners aren't shy, and I know you're bold. I mean, be on social media. Talk to your members of Congress. Talk to them on social media. Talk to them in person. And make the simple case of what this technology is and why you care about it. Because of freedom. Because of making it easy to transport payments. It's a hedge against inflation. And just help educate people of what it is. It's a technology.
Right. Great. And so maybe we'll sort of wrap it up with this final question, which is on dangerous ice here. But do you think that in the future, if you held another crypto roundtable, somebody like the vice president might be willing to attend?
Well, I hope so. I think there's a new generation of politicians in both parties who have values that support innovation, who support more freedom for individuals, who support decentralization of economic opportunity, and who understand the value of Bitcoin and of many cryptocurrencies, and want America to lead. And we are people who champion builders, who champion entrepreneurs, who champion innovation, who want America to have that innovation. And I'm going to make that case, and I'm going to work in a bipartisan way because this is important for the country. And what I would love is for the next Bitcoin conferences, not to have Republican or Democrat, but to just have Americans embrace this, because this is the right thing for America.
Great. Appreciate that. Couldn't have said it better myself. Thank you, Congressman.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
I think Congressman Wiley Nickel. There is a distinction a little bit between you and the last person that was out here, right? So I think that Congressman Khanna leans a little bit more liberal, and you would consider yourself a Democrat, but more moderate. So can you just at least introduce that as an idea and how it intersects with your Bitcoin view?
Yeah, I think the point that is important to make is, in the Democratic Party, we have a wide range of opinions, but when we're talking about digital assets, it runs the gamut from left to right to center, and the future of Bitcoin and crypto has to be a bipartisan future. That's the only way we're going to ever get anything done in Washington, is if we work together on this in a bipartisan way. That's been my focus in Congress when it's been passing FIT 21, the digital assets market structure bill. This I think, folks, by the way, in Congress we have done almost nothing. Least productive Congress in our nation's history. We've done must-pass bills like the budget, the debt ceiling, supporting Ukraine and Israel, but crypto has the chance to be the big bipartisan thing we do in this Congress. So that's been our focus.
Great, yeah. And I've always said in the space that Bitcoin provides maybe one of the only opportunities to actually have an important substantive discussion that isn't about a political football, right? Going back and forth and playing gamesmanship in that way. So I can appreciate this attempt to bridge that political gap and work on both sides of the aisle. And so to that event, or to that idea, what kind of support are you seeing in Congress as you sort of walk the halls and you're talking about these digital assets and Bitcoin and the promise that it has? What kind of reactions are you getting from your colleagues in Congress?
It's been great. It's been the first time Congress has never ever voted on crypto in our nation's history. We're operating off of a 100-year-old securities law, so it was a big deal that we passed FIT 21 with 71 Democrats. I was part of a group, including Ro Khanna, you heard from, organizing to make sure we kept this as a bipartisan issue. It was a big deal that we were able to get those Democrats on board. But the job for everybody here, it's about education. If we educate folks in Congress on these issues, we're going to get more and more support.
That's great. And I think, like we were talking about with Congressman Khanna, right? A common sense approach to legislation, to regulation, to make the space work, function properly, not hurt people, but not overstepping to stifle innovation is really the key. And so, in your view, how are the ways that Bitcoin can actually work towards making transparent, fair, and open for your constituents?
Yeah, no, I mean, crypto has the chance to totally democratize finance, turning dictatorships into democracies, to empowering folks to have control of their money, to bring down costs, to increase speed of transactions. This is revolutionary technology, which we need to embrace. And and I look at, I'm here in Nashville. I used to work for Al Gore, a great Tennessean. We had the internet. Everybody was behind it. This revolutionary new technology, and the folks who are against Web3 and crypto, they're going to look back in 10 years and just be like, what were you thinking?
Right. You can imagine somebody proposing that we ban the internet from, in the early 90s or something like that, right? It doesn't make sense. And if you ban it here, or if you try to stifle it here, it's going to go someplace else, right? And so one of the things that Congressman Khanna mentioned is like using more sustainable green energy, right? So if you make the mistake of banning it in America, you don't know where that mining power is going to go, right? And it's probably going to be a lot less clean than it is here. So these kinds of unintended consequences where these politicians saying, well, we should do this or do that, we need to think through all of those.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I know that you are into the Bitcoin space, into the crypto space. You want to advocate for common sense sort of legislation, regulation around this space. So what are some of the things that you're doing, hopefully making connections with people, across the political aisle? But yeah, tell me about some of that.
Yeah, no, obviously we've got the former president coming on the stage. This is a big issue. We have representatives, including Roe, asking for 4 things from the DNC and the next Democratic nominee for president. Pro-asset digital language in the party's platform, selecting a vice presidential candidate sophisticated in digital asset policy, selecting a pro-innovation SEC chair, and engaging with the industry in a meaningful way. Those are the things that I think are...
Yeah.
And I'm very optimistic. We've been working hard behind the scenes, having senior level meetings with folks, with the Office of the Vice President, with the campaign, to get a reset. Vice President Harris understands this issue. Her husband is someone I know who gets it, and I think we're going to get to see a reset, which will be a big deal in the space. And again, my hope is that folks who come out of this conference understand that the future has to be a bipartisan one. If we politicize the issue, we will just poison the well for 10 years in Congress, and it's going to be really hard for folks who are pro, innovation like me to get things done.
That's great. Yeah, no, I appreciate that effort, right? And I do think it speaks to this idea that the polarization in the crypto and Bitcoin space can often seem a lot more exaggerated than it really is behind the scenes, right? On social media, or if you hyper-focus on one or two politicians on the left in particular, you might get the sense that everybody on the left doesn't like Bitcoin, but that's certainly not the case. So the efforts like this, where you're actually making some demands and there's a group of lawmakers behind it, is great news, and I'm happy to hear it. Yeah. So more generally, when we think about this bipartisan approach, which, as you said, right, we're going to hear all about these executive orders, but things like that don't last, right? So we need legislation. And are you finding that people on the right side of the aisle are willing to work with you on these innovative technologies too?
No, it's been, again, one of the biggest things we've done in this Congress so far in a bipartisan way. We've got, we know that Schumer and the Senate Democrats are very committed to getting this done. I think we're going to see some news out of Washington in the next few weeks. So, there's a very good collaborative approach on this issue. And I think for folks who are at this conference, it's so important to continue to make that push to educate Democrats and Republicans in Congress and at all levels about the amazing transformational nature of this technology.
That's great, yeah. And, there's people who are in the audience here or maybe watching at home who maybe they themselves are more conservative or Republican, but they live in a Democratic district, right? So you are allowed to contact your representative and voice your support of Bitcoin, and you should be doing this no matter whose district you're in and who's representing you in Congress. So just another plug for making your voice heard. Speak to your Congress people and your elected representatives so that they know how important it is for you and the people around you, right, for all of these ideals. So you think about the political landscape now, and again, you said a lot's changed in the last week, and that's an understatement, right? But in my mind, I had one reaction when Donald Trump came out in support of Bitcoin. I feel like it's great to have a presidential candidate in support of Bitcoin, but of course I worried about the backlash against that, right, from people on the left who would just dismiss it out of hand just because Trump supported it, and that might be a reality that we have. So what is your feeling on the importance of liberals, progressives, Democratic moderates to just stand up for Bitcoin in the light of Donald Trump supporting it?
Yeah, no, I think it's important to be here right on the same stage, making a progressive case for Bitcoin and for crypto. But you're going to hear from Donald Trump later, and I think it's worth pointing out his own words on this issue. In 2019, Donald Trump said, and I quote, "I am not a fan of Bitcoin and the other cryptocurrencies which are not money." He said all the bad talking points. He said they facilitate unlawful behavior, including drugs and illegal activities. And that's right. And in 2021. And folks, in 2021, he called it a scam. That's right. Folks, I can tell you one thing, and I want to say this as politely and respectfully as I can. Donald Trump was president for 4 years. He did nothing on this issue, and right now I can tell you he's totally full of shit.
So that's very brave of you. And you know what? As Bitcoiners, I think that we can respect some bravery. And I do think that people would say, yeah, thank you. Donald Trump, like every other politician, is allowed to change his mind on this, right? And you all need to remember that that's exactly what's happening, right? And that's okay, because we have people now who are actually talking about Bitcoin and digital currencies in a really productive way. And if Donald Trump is at the top of the talking about Bitcoin, and a lot of the Democrats who aren't at the top but are actually talking about it, that's really good news for me, right? I think that we need a bottom-up approach and actually convince the rest of the Democrats, and there are many who are supporting what you're doing, convince the rest of them too, right? And so I think that that's really what our focus needs to be on.
And I wanted to talk to everybody here because I think it's so important that, again, you know, we're gonna have folks who want to use this issue for their own benefit, but if you're looking long term, you've got to make sure you keep this as a bipartisan issue. And I agree. You know, I agree too. We've got what I think are 1 million single issue voters on this issue. Yeah. So presidential candidates, and you know, Kamala Harris included, need to make their position known. Right. They need to come out with strong messaging. And, you know, I think we're at a reset on that, and I'm very optimistic about what we're going to hear.
Yeah, that's great. No, and I do think that we should be excited about a reset and a continued dialogue, right? It's not as if the discussion is over, and there's a lot more work to be done, and I appreciate the work that you're doing. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks.
Anyone can be a part of the Bitcoin economy. It's like a good church.
Because it's an ethical ideology, there are many people that feel very spiritual about it.
I think that Bitcoin has those characteristics to be not just the most Islamic form of money, but the most Jewish and the most Christian form of money as well.
Bitcoin is just another step in the technological development of how we can serve God better.
It is trying to remove politics from money.
Bitcoin can make the world a better place.
Had become the largest premier global Bitcoin gathering in the world, leading hyper-Bitcoinization. While Miami was incredible, it was time to set the stage for Bitcoin in New City. So we took the conference on the road. Nashville, Tennessee was the obvious choice, a city known for music and freedom. Next year, the conference is hitting the road again in search of the next global stage. We are headed to a new city next year. Hyper-Bitcoinization right around the corner. We have no plans to take a foot off the gas. Find out where we are headed next. Scan the QR code and be at the main stage for the big announcement.
So what is money and how does it get value? Paper money has value because someone says so. Bitcoin is different. It's like digital gold. It has value for many of the reasons gold does, but that's only the start. It has a limited supply, only 21 million, so no one can decide to just print more. Because no central authority controls it, it can never be shut down. Unlike with banks and credit card companies, you don't need approval to use it. It puts the power back in all our hands. Bitcoin lets you control your finances. Kraken lets you buy Bitcoin. Kraken, see what crypto can be.
Welcome back to the Mara News Desk, powered by Bitcoin Magazine. I'm Pete Rizzo, editor of Bitcoin Magazine. It's the grand finale of Bitcoin 2024 here in Nashville, Tennessee. You just heard from Ro Khanna. Democrats support Bitcoin but are as a competing alternative to monopoly power. Wiley Nickel, a representative from North Carolina, quote, Bitcoin has to be bipartisan, calling for a reset on crypto. We've got another all-star panel here to react to the news as it's coming across the stage. All the way to my left, Frank Corva, lead business reporter at Bitcoin Magazine. To his right, Bernie Moreno, businessman running for Senate in Ohio as a Republican. And last but not least, John Deaton, successful trial attorney, U.S. Marine veteran, running against Elizabeth Warren. So I want to start there on the panel. Obviously, here a lot of negative sentiment about the Biden administration's approach to Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. John, can you lead there and tell us why is it so bad?
Well, first of all, when you look at her bill, I call it the banker's ban on Bitcoin bill, written by the banking industry. It actually is a de facto ban on self-custody of Bitcoin in the United States of America. It doesn't get any worse than that.
Right.
And she represents the epitome of what happens in Washington. 12 years ago, she promised to go to D.C. and hold the bankers accountable. We fast forward a decade later, they're writing her bill, couldn't beat them, so she joined them, and I think she's the epitome of what's wrong in Washington, D.C.
Bernie, your stance on the current administration's attitude towards Bitcoin and crypto?
They hate the industry. They want to destroy the industry. The ability to have control over currency. So for the people who view the world from the lens, politicians should be in charge of lives, the idea of a decentralized currency gives power to the people, the antithesis of what they want. So you may see some signaling around maybe softening about a position on Bitcoin. That's an election year ruse. They fundamentally want to destroy Bitcoin in America.
Interesting. Frank, you've been working in the industry. Is that the person in the industry that the Democrats' current administration are out to destroy Bitcoin?
Sadly, it is. I think it's creating a lot of uncertainty. We even saw in the ruling around the ETFs, when the courts ruled, they said that the SEC was acting in an arbitrary and capricious manner, if I'm quoting them properly. So what's happening is that because we don't have proper regulation, because we know that sort of under the hood that the powers that be don't really want to see this industry too much, what you're getting is sort of like, well, we're not really going to do anything, but we'll just sort of apply pressure and you'll get fined. Get sued when we want to, and we do that, it creates a lot of fear. The sad part there is in America we should be leading innovation, and we're not when this sort of stuff is happening with the regulatory bodies that the people that are currently in power now.
John, let's get into your specific policies. I mean, how would you change this if elected?
Well, the first thing, you never want to ask me, am I a pro-Bitcoin or pro-crypto candidate? And I say no. But I am as a pro-freedom candidate, and Bitcoin represents freedom. It certainly
That's a much better answer than the first one.
It certainly represents economic freedom. Matter of fact, I call Elizabeth Warren the crypto candidate 2024. With illegal immigration, debt crisis, opioid crisis, inflation crisis, foreign wars, why did she, when she announced her re-election, focus, I'm going to ban Bitcoin, I'm going to come up with an anti-crypto
Financial Protection Bureau and its creation sort of rising to prominence around the great financial crisis. Going over to you, Bernie, and your reaction to Elizabeth Warren's trajectory here.
Well, she made a deal with the administration where she could make her people to control the agencies, and she's the one who allowed Biden to get into power. So they made that. You see her going into these regulatory agencies. But to your point, they don't want to give the industry regulatory certainty because that allows the industry to flourish. Because what we want as entrepreneurs, give us the rules of the road. Tell us where the guardrails are, and then we'll develop technology accordingly. But they purposely want uncertainty because it's uncertainty that allows them to punish people doing different aspects of Bitcoin. But this is a philosophical war between freedom and liberty, centralized control. Freedom and liberty versus centralized control. And what Elizabeth Warren doesn't hate banks. She just loves banks that she controls. So don't mix that up. So she's not on the side of small banks or little banks. She's on the side of her wanting to tell us how to live our lives. Fundamentally, she thinks she's smarter than we are. Sherrod Brown thinks he's smarter than we are. They look down on us and say, you live your own life, so I'm going to have to do it for you. That's how they view it.
Well, obviously, John, you're promising to displace or remove Elizabeth Warren from power. Bernie, I want to stay with you. You're specific.
If you're somebody who's doing work in this industry, you understand the rules of the road. We have to separate Bitcoin technology innovations from the money side of Bitcoin. Very different. We also, by the way, need people who actually understand the technology writing these regulations. Right now, in Sherrod Brown, who's actually the head of the bank, Sherrod Brown's Elizabeth Warren's useful idiot, but it's Sherrod who's actually in charge of the banking committee. He just doesn't even understand any of it. So he takes these left-wing talking points that Bitcoin's for money laundering and drug dealing and sex trafficking, because none of that, of course, existed prior to Bitcoin, right? It's obviously absurd. But we have to give that certainty. If we do that, this industry has to grow here in America. That's the most important message. It will happen. Bitcoin's inevitable. It's just, do we want it here or do we want it somewhere else?
Well, obviously the narrative around Bitcoin and crypto in Washington changing. We've seen the rise of the Fair Shake PACs. We've seen the Harris polls. Frank, maybe you can give us a little bit more of the context for people just joining at home.
Yeah, so we see PACs, we see for the first time, and I think this is the first election where you're seeing the power of the political action of the crypto industry. They put together different lobbying groups that are now pushing back and stopping bills from going through, bills that are not favorable for the industry. They're by no means as powerful as something as maybe the NRA or some of the bigger lobbyists out there, or the bigger lobbying groups, but we're seeing that crypto is now represented in Washington. It has a voice. We had David Zell on the desk earlier from the Bitcoin Policy Institute. So there's now money in this game. We're listening as a result, I think.
Well, John, coming back to you, we heard Rokan on stage calling for bipartisanship, not to make Bitcoin a partisan issue. What would you say to his comments on stage?
I'd say he's on point. I mean, when you look at this technology, it should not be a partisan issue. In fact, if you look at people like Elizabeth Warren, who claim to be for the unbanked or underbanked and for the poor and the middle class, you would adopt this technology. You would be a proponent of Bitcoin and its potential. But it comes down to what Bernie talked about control. I couldn't figure out, to be honest with you, for a long time why she was focusing on banning this technology and Bitcoin when we have those real world issues, immigration, debt, everything I talked about. Then she went on Chuck Todd's Meet the Press and literally told him America is ready for a central bank digital currency. And that comes down to the control. She wants to tell us how to live, what to own, what's better for our families. And the one thing I can tell you is that I think we know what's best for us and our families and not to be told by the government.
Well, Bernie, over to you. How do we keep Bitcoin nonpartisan if we all vote Republican?
Well, again, sadly, that's not where we are today. Roe's a nice guy. I know him. I know his father-in-law really well. Good person. But at the end of the day, this is election year politics. What he's trying to say is enough positive signaling so that it's not the money that's in Fair Shake that matters, it's the people. Yep. Look at this convention, 24,000 people. This Bitcoin movement is much more just money and politics. It's back to we the people. I think, what is it, tens of millions of people in this country own Bitcoin. The idea that somebody like Sherrod Brown or Elizabeth Warren tell us, after they've confiscated our tax dollars, used it for illegal immigrants and for foreign countries that hate us, and then want to tell us what to do with the money that they didn't take, is fundamentally insulting. And no matter what Roe says or what some of these Democrats try to do to try to get this not to be an election year issue, I think history will look back at this moment and say, what saved this country from going down the path of Venezuela and tyranny? It's the Bitcoiners, because our founding fathers would have been Bitcoiners.
Well, obviously, election 2024, the media in some ways on trial. Frank, I want to go back to you and talk about the context of this report. Politicization in the air, even about this conference. Can you talk about some of the negative headlines you've seen just because of the political engagement we've had at this conference?
Yeah, I think people just now think, you mentioned this a little bit earlier, that this is just, Bitcoin is now just a Republican thing, when it's not. It's an apolitical money, right? It's just a technology. It's a neutral technology. Here's what I would say, though. So if Republicans are embracing it, I would second guess the party that's not embracing it. So it's an inclusive technology. Progressives, people on the left love to use these words, financial inclusion, and I don't see why they wouldn't embrace a technology that doesn't require you to KYC, to AML, to do these things where maybe someone doesn't have an idea, whether they're in the United States or outside, a money that's accessible to everyone who has an internet connection around the world, in a way that's sort of spreading the American ideology. No, freedom, the ability to transact, the ability to store wealth. So I think that pushing back, moving forward, I hope that this becomes less of a partisan issue, but I want to thank the Republican representation that's come out, both of you included, for coming out and saying this is a technology we support because we think it's a pro-freedom and pro-American technology.
Well, we're streaming live on X, YouTube, Rumble, so much more to go today in terms of headline speakers. I want to back up to yesterday. Obviously, we saw Robert F. Kennedy Jr., independent candidate for president, coming out very strongly in support of Bitcoin and the industry. I'll read his executive orders. I will sign an executive order directing the
something similar about making Bitcoin a reserve asset. And listen, it makes sense. Big in this way. The United States owns the most gold in the world. So if you look at Bitcoin and you look at it as a form of digital gold, then why not own the most Bitcoin along with gold? And so I think we're headed that way. We have to control the narrative, though, right? The narrative that Elizabeth Warren and others are saying criminals and illicit activities and all of that, and that it's going to be a threat.
They might say it even sounds a little bit out of touch that we want to buy 4 million Bitcoin at a time when Americans are struggling.
Well, no, look, when you look at 80% of all U.S. dollars were printed in the last 3.5 years. So we have to have a way. And if you look at, we want to bolster the dollar. Smart, tailored legislation with stable coins and all of this is a way to drive the dominance of the U.S. dollar. So we just got to educate that. You know, Bernie made the point, we have to have leaders who understand the technology in order to write the appropriate laws.
Running out of time before we go back to the main stage. Bernie, I want to turn it over to you as someone who's running for a Senate seat. Should the United States buy Bitcoin? Will the United States buy Bitcoin if you're elected?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I want to go back to what you said for a second, though. This shouldn't be a partisan issue. I think most people
kita
here
suggest
are not
dapat 17%.
but
Kira
we do have a
Ebora ni boleh
two-party
outdoor.
system.
Ebora memang boleh.
So for those of you who are
Kita tak
independents,
samakan, tak
libertarians,
sama.
you're not
Kalau
sure,
berkatakanlah
am I Republican
Zindo
or
nak buat 2
Democrat,
perfume yang sama.
join the Republic. We're going to save some of those moderate Democrats and bring them over to just common sense.
It's the grand finale of Bitcoin 2024. It's a packed house here at Music City Center. We're sending it over to our roving reporter, Q Kahimi. He's out on the floor looking at the action, and wow, it's wild over here. We're going to head over to him to give you a look at what's going on the floor.
Thank you, guys. Look, we made it. I am here. It's GA Day 2. I have no idea how I made it, but we made it out. You know, I was doing a lot of research for everyone at home. Everyone at Bitcoin Magazine. We had over 50 different after-hours parties last night. I was doing deep research. I made it to 48 of them, and then the sun came up. So thank God this robot is here to give me some coffee so I can make it to the last 2. I'm going to send it back to you guys at the desk.
The Bitcoin Conference. Dream to build a community in 2019 in of San Francisco. Your Bitcoin conference in years that kickstarted a revolution. And then Miami, a place where enthusiasts, developers, dreamers, and innovators can come together to make Bitcoin better. It has been an amazing 5 years and 8 conferences, thanks to all of you. Bitcoin Conference has become the largest premier global Bitcoin gathering in the world, leading hyper-Bitcoinization. While Miami was incredible, it was time to set the stage Bitcoin in a new city. So we took the conference on the road. Nashville, Tennessee is the obvious choice, a city known for music and freedom. Next year, the conference is hitting again in search of the next global stage. We are headed to a new city next week with hyper-Bitcoinization around the corner. We have plans to take the foot off the gas. Find out where we are headed next. Scan the QR code and be at the main stage for the big announcement.
the second best. There is no second best.
We will ensure that the future of crypto and the future of Bitcoin will be made in America.
So yeah, today we're going to be talking about runes.
We're talking about runes.
But first,
But that's only the start. It has a limited supply, only 21 million, so no one can decide to just print more. Because no central authority controls it, it can never be shut down. And unlike with banks and credit card companies, you don't need approval to use it. It puts the power back in all our hands. Bitcoin lets you control your finances. Kraken lets you buy Bitcoin. Kraken, see what crypto can be.
Anyone can be a part of the Bitcoin economy. It's like a good church.
Because it's an ethical ideology, there are many people that feel very spiritual about it.
I think that Bitcoin has those characteristics to be not just the most Islamic form of money, but the most Jewish and the most Christian form of money as well.
Bitcoin is just another step in the technological development of how we can serve God better.
It is trying to remove politics from money.
Bitcoin can make the world a better place.
Thanks, guys. I'm coming to you from the Satoshi Summer Camp. This is the first year we have ever had anything specifically for the kids. I am having way too much fun in here, and it's a problem. But come check us out. We'll have some more stuff here as well. Back to you guys at the desk.
Well, welcome back to the Mara News Desk, powered by Bitcoin Magazine. I'm your host, Pete Rizzo, editor of Bitcoin Magazine. It's the grand finale of Bitcoin 2024. You just saw Q enjoying himself, our roving reporter hanging at the kids' camp. We appreciate, though, many of you at home may be joining for the first time. And introducing Aaron Van Wergem, technical editor of Bitcoin Magazine. This is called Bitcoin Basics. And if you're at home hearing about the policy proposals for America, that America should be embracing mining, and you're not sure what mining is, Aaron's got your answer. Aaron?
Yes. So, Bitcoin uses mining. What is mining? Well, Bitcoin is decentralized. It's a peer-to-peer system. So, there's no one in charge. It's users connected with each other, sharing information. But Bitcoin is also digital. It's really sort of a number on a computer, and a transaction as well. It's data on a computer. Now, data on a computer can be copied. Computers are very good at copying data. So what happens if you try to send this Bitcoin to two different people? You copy the Bitcoins then through. But who gets that? On Bitcoin, no one is in charge. There's no company, there's no bank. No one gets to say which Bitcoin is the original one. Now, other electronic money systems, they do solve that with a central party, like whether that's a company like PayPal or a bank. Some central party, if you try to spend the same money twice, that central party will say, no, this one cannot go through because you already spent that money. So Bitcoin had to come up with the other solution, a different solution. So what Satoshi Nakamoto thought of was, let's make a lottery. We'll have a lottery, we'll call it a lottery. Every 10 minutes on average, someone wins that lottery, and that person can decide which of the transactions go through. If there's a conflicting transaction, if someone tries to copy Bitcoin, the person that wins the lottery gets to decide which one goes through. But it's not a lottery that's played with money. Rather, it's a lottery that's played with computing power. So people invest their computing power, they try to create a Bitcoin block, is what really happens. And if they win, that's why they play the lottery. If they win new Bitcoin. So that's how new Bitcoins come into circulation. So Bitcoin, in that sense, very cleverly kills two birds with one stone. For one, it solves the double spend problem. And two, it allows currency to come in circulation without anyone in control. So who can be a miner? Over the years, however, more and more people have started to be a miner, try to win this lottery, and it became more and more difficult to actually win.
For the fast facts on mining, of course, there's much more in his very excellent book, The Genesis Book, the story of the people and projects that inspired Bitcoin. You can find that at BitcoinMagazine.com, BitcoinMagazine.com books on sale right now. We're going to go backstage now to another roving reporter, Isabella Santos, backstage with investor Bill Miller IV. We'll be right back after the interview.
All right, Bill. So how do you see Bitcoin as a potential driver of generational wealth creation?
Well, right now the value coin embodies all of that and more. And so from a fundamental valuation perspective, if you think it can get to digital gold, that's 12 times upside from here, from a appreciation potential perspective. And younger people have the opportunity to buy into that now and save for many, many years. Obviously, I don't think that's going to happen overnight, but you have the opportunity to put yourself into something that has massive upside potential. It's got a now 14-year track record or so. So from my perspective, not to own it is actually a big mistake. And I would encourage all young people to own it. It's one of my biggest personal assets, and I'm buying more.
You know, they say there's a correlation with people saying that the people that don't own Bitcoin are the ones that criticize Bitcoin, but the people that have, you know, more of the knowledge, I would say, about it.
Yeah, I don't know anybody that's actually spent time learning about it, studying it, and understanding it, that then says, yeah, I don't want anything to do with that. You know, people just think, oh, it's this weird technology and all these people are jumping on some bandwagon. But when you actually spend the time to understand the protocol and why it's so empowering from a personal and individual perspective, I don't see why you wouldn't own it.
So what are the key challenges and opportunities you see for families looking to incorporate Bitcoin into their long-term wealth strategy?
Understanding it is the most important thing, just because it's so different from any other denominator we have, whether it's dollar, euros, yen, whatever, just because the political system that everyone is used to living in, it doesn't exist within Bitcoin. Bitcoin is a digital protocol that is uncorruptible, that isn't changing, whereas if you look at the history of fiat currencies, people jockey for power. They eventually want to give out tax breaks. They want to give money away to someone else for free. They print more money. Inflation occurs. And so Bitcoin is your own personal savings mechanism independent of that process.
So what is money and how does it get value? Paper money has value because someone says so. Bitcoin is different. It's like digital gold. It has value for many of the reasons gold does, but that's only the start. It has a limited supply, like 21 million. No one can just print more. Because the central authority controls it, it can never be shut down. And unlike with banks and credit card companies, you don't need approval to use it. It puts the power back in all our hands. Bitcoin lets you control your finances. Kraken lets you buy Bitcoin. Kraken.
The more they print, the more it gets diluted. Who it's good for is the people at the tippy top.
Because in order to keep the system going, they have to keep printing money.
And Bitcoin is that tool that allows us to beat the money printer.
Bitcoin is powerful.
Welcome back to the Mara News Desk, powered by Bitcoin Magazine. I'm your host, Pete Rizzo, editor at Bitcoin Magazine. It's the grand finale of Bitcoin 2024 today. We've got lots more in store. Marsha Blackburn, Republican senator from Tennessee. Vivek Ramaswamy, former Republican candidate for president. Ro Khanna, obviously just on stage moments earlier. And here now, joining us on the live stream, going out to X, Rumble, and YouTube, Scott Pressler, founder and executive director of earlyvoteaction.com. Scott, welcome.
Thank you. It's my first Bitcoin conference, my first Bitcoin experience. So
Well,
this is like a trial by fire.
We're happy to have you, and we're glad that you're here learning. Obviously, Donald J. Trump speaking later and
Yes.
sending a big message by being here. So maybe you can tell us, what has that message been, and how has it been received amongst his constituents?
Well, I've found that, I mean, clearly looking around, because you could very well elect a government that wages a war against Bitcoin, like, you know, President Joe Biden has said he would, and we don't have Kamala. She has rejected the opportunity to come here today. And so I want this entire conference to register, to vote, and to preserve the freedom to buy and trade Bitcoin.
Let me ask it maybe a little bit differently. Was there shock or surprise that Donald Trump was here? And obviously there's been years of negative headlines. That has to have an effect. Are there still reservations amongst people, or amongst Republican voters right now about Bitcoin?
I think it's mostly from a place of not understanding what it is. I mean, bring it down respectfully, you know, to a way that people can really understand what that means. Like, I'm just learning about sats, like I said to you, and I learned what a halving is.
Oh, okay.
I know, I'm getting there.
What is a halving?
Well, a halving happens like every 4 years, where basically the monetary Bitcoin, it falls, so then the amount that you can actually mine reduces and becomes less and less.
Right, that's how we ensure that there's a fixed monetary policy.
Correct, and I think that's important, especially what we're seeing in society today with inflation, and that the dollar, we can just print that ad infinitum, and so therefore, what makes Bitcoin so revolutionary and different is the fact that it is finite, and therefore it is valuable. And so it'll be interesting if Donald Trump today talks about the fact that this is a currency, not a commodity, and therefore is the government going to stop perhaps even selling Bitcoin? I think that would be very interesting.
Obviously, people feeling the pinch out there. Inflation is in the headlines. People are struggling. Do you think the average Republican voter connects Bitcoin to that problem and sees it as a solution, or are they still more of a curiosity?
Here's the connection that I don't think a lot of people are talking about. The reason why I think Republicans and conservatives especially are willing to embrace Bitcoin is because of COVID.
Okay.
Because if you have wrong think, if you think conservatively and the government is controlled by people that feel in opposition to you, well, could they shut off your water, your gas, your banking, which happened to people, you know, after J6 especially, their banking was shut off, that banks wouldn't do business with them. Well, with Bitcoin, that is your ability to still buy and trade and sell, and you're not going to have the government dictating who you can do business with. And I think it really comes down to freedom.
We saw this in Canada as well with the trucker movement. Robert F. Kennedy saying that's what inspired him. So an international problem, would you agree?
Oh, yes. Well, what happened, well, Australia, the United Kingdom, yes, I think this is the last really free bastion, but yes, I would dare say that if we are not careful, we could have a global currency that doesn't allow us to do this.
Let's talk about your personal journey again. Earlyvoteaction.com. You're accepting
Early Vote Action. I am focused on electing Republicans and Donald Trump into office, and I want candidates that are going to be pro-Bitcoin. Now, we're focused on voter registration, and so my org is accepting crypto, and we want to lead the charge on other PACs and political organizations also accepting.
Earlyvoteaction.com. We're sending it over to the main stage for a special announcement from Howard Lutnick. You know him as CEO of Cantor Fitzgerald. We'll be right back on the desk with the very great Scott Pressler. Stay with us.
So in January of 23, I gave my first interview, and I made it crystal clear that Tether had the money and that we were holding it. It's not another thing. We hold their money. USDT is fundamentally different than USD. Out, fail. Think about it. Circle had $3.3 billion of your reserves uninsured in the Silicon Valley Bank when it went bust. Now, I've told you, Tether and USDT holds treasuries, right, which earn like 5.25% interest. Why would you put $3.3 billion in an uninsured bank account earning 25 basis points, 0.25%, and be uninsured? You know, I don't have enough time to stand up here to tell you that story, so if you want to meet me afterward, I'll tell you the story about why I think they had it there. It makes no sense. So obviously, Circle broke the peg hard, as you would expect. And so let's go through this for one more time. So Cantor is one of the largest electronic traders in the world. So I sought to be onboarded with USDC because we trade BTC, we trade USDT, we wanted to trade USDC. And after months and months and months of trying, Circle came back and said we could transact and we could create $1 million of Circle a week. And if we wanted to redeem, we could redeem $500,000 a week. Now, for one of the largest trading firms in the world, you know what that is? That's a joke. That's a trainee for an hour. So the answer was, we tried and we can't redeem. So I don't know who can, but I would ask you to go check who can redeem with Circle and USDC. So Tether currently has $114 billion in reserves and another $11 billion of their own equity. That's $125 billion. You know my brother was killed? You know my brother was killed by jihad. And so was my best friend, 658 people I cared about. So Cantor Fitzgerald knows jihad. So can you imagine a competitor of Tether saying that Tether is associated with jihad? Let me make it crystal clear. We would never, ever be associated with a company that has anything to do with jihad. And it disgusts me. It disgusts me. Someone parked a truck in front of my office saying Tether is associated with Hamas. What a bunch of crap. Seriously. Why do I know that? Because when we formed our relationship with them, we helped them onboard those institutions. We helped them do it. As you all know, every transaction on the blockchain is traceable, and Tether will seize any amount of coin that is involved in illicit activity. They will be caught. So whoever said things about Tether, they're knowingly false, they know it's wrong, and it needs to go away. All right, so why do I care about all this stuff, right? I run Cantor Fitzgerald. Why do I care? Because I care about America and dollar hegemony, the dollar being everywhere in the world. So you've got $100+ billion held in Argentina, Venezuela, and Turkey. If we go to a taxi right now in Argentina and try to pay, they'll take Tether. If you go to Turkey and go to a grocer, they'll take Tether because they don't want the local fiat currency because we all know it devalues massively. So I care about the 300 million wallets that hold Tether because those 300 million wallets are financing Cantor Fitzgerald, and all of its partners are a fan of Bitcoin. Does Cantor Fitzgerald own Bitcoin? A shed load of Bitcoin. My view is Bitcoin, like gold, should be free to trade everywhere in the world. And as the largest wholesaler in the world, we are going to do everything in our power to make it so. Bitcoin is the same as gold, and Bitcoin should trade the same as gold everywhere in the world without exception and without limitation. So Cantor is a rock star in the digital space, right? We support miners, we support power companies, we support data centers. We're here to support you if you're in the business of digital assets and crypto. We are here to support you. People, when I just walked in here, there were people coming up to me saying, thanks for the research, smartest research, best research. We're going to do all sorts of things that take care of you. So we are an investment bank that works hard for digital assets. We've raised billions of dollars, billions, for crypto and digital companies. I'll give you an example. Raised $100 million for BitDeer, $200 million for TerraWolf, Riot, Cypher. You know, we have a huge list. So if you want to do business in this space, you'll call us and you'll talk to us, and we'll take care of you. We host an amazing crypto conference in Miami in November. Not like this, though. This is like rock star, man. This is like the best. Okay. So why do I say all this in front of you? Because today I have an announcement to make. Cantor Fitzgerald is here to announce that we are launching a Bitcoin financing business. We will offer leverage to those who own Bitcoin. We are going to launch with $2 billion of lending. And once we put out the $2 billion of lending, we will go up in increments of $2 billion. You have to realize Cantor and BGC, its largest wholesaler, finance and arrange vast amounts. And we are going to now build that ecosystem for Bitcoin. So the moral of the story is we are going to welcome Bitcoin into the financing family of the global financial markets, and Cantor Fitzgerald is going to be your sponsor. We will build the best platform for financing Bitcoin. We will work with the best custodians. We are committed to your ecosystem of Bitcoin. So, in closing, we are Cantor Fitzgerald, and we will support Bitcoin. Thank you, everybody.
Why?
What's the second best? There is no second best.
That kickstarted a revolution. And then Miami, a place where enthusiasts, developers, dreamers, and innovators could come together to make Bitcoin better. It has been an amazing 5 years and 8 thanks to all of you. Bitcoin Conference has become the largest premier global Bitcoin gathering in the world, leading hyper-Bitcoinization. While Miami was incredible, it was time to set the stage for Bitcoin in a new city. So we took the conference on the road. Nashville, Tennessee was the obvious choice, a city known for music and freedom. Next year, the conference is hitting the road again in search of the next global stage. We are headed to a new city next year. With hyper-Bitcoinization right around the corner, we have no plans to take the foot off the gas. Find out where we are headed next. Scan the QR code and be at the main stage for the big announcement.
So what is Bitcoin? Is different. It's like digital gold. It has value for many of the reasons gold does, but that's only the start. It has a limited supply, only 21 million, so no one can decide to just print more. Because no central authority controls it, it can never be shut down. Like with banks and credit card companies, you don't need approval to use it. It puts the power back in all our hands. Bitcoin lets you control your finances. Kraken lets you buy Bitcoin. Kraken, see what crypto can be.
Anyone can be a part of the
audit. I think that Bitcoin has those characteristics to be not just the most Islamic form of money, but the most Jewish and the most Christian form of money as well.
Bitcoin is just another step in the technological development of how we can serve God better.
It is trying to remove politics from money. Bitcoin can make the world a better place.
Welcome back to the Mara News Desk, powered by Bitcoin Magazine. Once again, I'm your host, Pete Rizzo, editor of Bitcoin Magazine. It's the grand finale, the last day of Bitcoin 2024. You just heard from Howard Lutnick, CEO at Cantor Fitzgerald, still to come. Donald J. Trump, 45th President of the United States. Now, our panel, everything that's happening on stage, and of course, all the excitement around election 2024. Here we've got the very great Scott Pressler, founder and executive director of earlyvoteaction.com, and to his left, joining us now, Natalie Brunell, host of Coin Stories.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Excited
Obviously,
to join.
Regulation of the ability to buy and trade and sell without the government being in our business. And so therefore, I would argue that at its heart, at its core, Bitcoin is inherently conservative because it's pro-freedom.
Well, a lot of people here are frustrated by the partisan nature, maybe the perception of this conference. Now, would you agree with Scott, inherently conservative, Bitcoin?
No, I think that Bitcoin is neutral and apolitical. It's one of the things I really like about this technology, that it's maybe the one thing that can bring us together at a time when we've never been more divided and polarized. I honestly miss the days when I was younger and I didn't know a person's political preference and I didn't prejudge them, and we got to a point of such extremes that in the last couple of years I feel like it's broken friendships, it's broken family bonds if you voted for one person over another. And when you strip away some of the, ideological things that everyone's focusing on, people at their core are very similar, right? You probably want to be free. You want to acquire the wealth or the ability to take care of your family and take care of your future generations. So many people sacrifice so much, not for themselves, but to make their children's lives or their grandchildren's lives better, or the people around them. I know that was my family story with the American dream, and I want us to come together on something that really empowers us to have opportunity and exchange value with one another in a system that's fair and not so corrupted and manipulated at its core that ultimately it concentrates so much wealth at the top at the expense of everyone else, because that does lead to that type of populism and division that we see.
Well, I'm sorry to interrupt, but let me make a message then. If at its core, if this is about unity and that we want freedom and finance for everybody, then my message, and so I welcome that unity.
Of course, on the stage just minutes ago on the live desk before both of our guests now, John Deep running for Senate.
Sense of accountability, and you won't do that when you have power, especially economic power, that has become so concentrated that, again, a few people benefit from it. They're able to capitalize and create these monopolies, and then the special interest machine that finances the donations that elect people, that gets going. It's just sort of the momentum flows, and all of a sudden you can't break it because it's concentrated that much power. So I hope that brings more accountability. It shrinks government from this welfare state that's intervening in everybody's lives, and returns also more personal accountability on us. Because if you know, it's like that, what do they say on airplanes, right? You got to put the oxygen mask on yourself before you help someone else. We have to take self-responsibility and stop looking to saviors that are going to ride in and promise us things for the next election, when really they are basically coming into office and staying there the 10 years, like 40 years, and not getting anything changed. So we need to hold them more accountable, and I think it starts with holding ourselves more accountable.
Scott, your response to Natalie's thoughts?
I agree. It is about accountability, and ultimately it's power to the people, power of the purse. But I would argue that holding people accountable is by also being a voter and being involved not only in Bitcoin, in growing your personal wealth and personal property, but by voting, we can hold those government people accountable by, for example, why are we not abolishing property taxes? Why are we making sure that there is no government regulation on Bitcoin, etc.? And so I would argue that the two are actually really hand in glove and that they come together.
Well, I want to talk a little bit about those friction points. Obviously, cultures colliding here. There is this idea that Bitcoin might be competitive with the U.S. dollar, right, Natalie, or even might undermine it to some extent.
Well, if people remember President Trump's early comments about Bitcoin, that was one of his issues. And no, I don't see this as a zero-sum game, at least not at the start. The dollar is so entrenched in the global financial system, and I think of it more as the currency that is the chosen medium of exchange. It is losing some of its monopoly over other currencies because of all the debt that we've accumulated, and so other countries are turning to, well, first of all, central banks are acquiring gold at record levels, and the countries are starting to make deals for things like oil in other currencies. But for now, I think the US dollar will remain the reserve currency, and I think Bitcoin is the best store of value asset that people can peacefully opt into as the best savings technology. And me personally, although I like to support Bitcoin businesses, I prefer to spend my fiat, spend my depreciating currency, and save my asset, my truly scarce decentralized asset that is the best performing investment that I could have made. I don't see them as competing. I think actually we could strengthen the US dollar, but I also do think that we are moving into a more multipolar world where countries will be competing, and maybe there will be a little bit more diversification in terms of reserves, including Bitcoin being that neutral reserve asset.
Scott, obviously Republicans want to support the dollar, right? So how do you enter Bitcoin in that conversation?
Well, I would say, I mean, I'm a little bit of a neophyte. I'm not going to lie that I'm not green to this, but I would say the best argument for Bitcoin is that, to my understanding, it's inflation proof, right? Where there is a finite supply versus our federal government, which seems to have an endless supply of just printing dollars, and so therefore the value of the dollar isn't what it was 50 years ago, etc. And I think that would be the biggest and strongest argument that you are going to be able to keep more of your money in your packet, and that it's actually worth what it is.
Well, that's why it's so strategic, because if a country adopts Bitcoin as a reserve asset, that is something that no one can confiscate, you can't be censored, and no one is going to inflate it away. And I think that countries have seen of dollars in order to keep this system afloat, and that's why they're moving away from it, and coin is that perfect alternative, and most people don't understand it yet.
Well, sending it back to the domain, just a few moments, wrapping up with our panel here. I want to talk about the personal aspects of voting and the idea that Bitcoin voters should single-issue voters. Your quick thoughts, Natalie. Should people be voting just on Bitcoin this election?
I'm a freedom maximalist. Vote with your heart. Do your homework, first of all. It's in the same way that I think people have to understand Bitcoin, know what you're investing in. Also know your candidate. A lot of people don't do their homework. They just kind of see a couple commercials, or they recognize, they don't look at actually the proposals that are before them. And I think it's important to question your own beliefs to strengthen them, or maybe you'll change your mind.
Scott, maybe your message to the Bitcoin single-issue voter out there?
Well, I don't want to necessarily take it from that perspective. I don't think anyone should be a single-issue voter. But what I love seeing from Donald Trump being here today is clearly Donald Trump is courting the Bitcoin vote. His presence here, him coming here, is saying to you on Bitcoin that he wants your vote, he wants to earn it, he is pro-freedom, and really you hit the nail on the head of being censorship as well. That when it comes to banking, we have seen if you have wrong think, if you have a political thought is in opposition to the government, they could very well shut down your bank. And so that's why Bitcoin is so important, because it is the overarching theme of Bitcoin is freedom. Finance is freedom.
Of course, we're just hours away from a former president taking the stage at Bitcoin 2024. History will be made. Stay tuned on the live stream on X and Rumble. We're going to send it back to the Nakamoto stage. Government out of control. Nothing stops this train. That's the panel moderated by the great Guy Swan. We'll be right back after the...
We're going off of a cliff. This is all, like, it's just a matter of time, and time, I'm not talking 20 or 30 years, I'm saying like in the next few years, this whole game of musical chairs is up, and I think that's, for you Bitcoin people, I mean, I know you guys have had like a crazy run, but the potential for what you guys have over these next few years is gonna be, like, the sky is the limit. So that's the cool thing that is cool about this whole conference.
Yeah, absolutely. Luke?
I'm going to be a lot drier than you, Dave. That's easy for me to do. No, I think you touched on the interest point, and that's exactly, I think, a key to the issue. Something I tracked. I was looking at it, and it was about 65% of tax receipts. And I said, okay, well, when these three numbers get to 100%, stuff will start to get real. We might start to have a problem. And I kind of ran out based on sort of just straight line run rates of each respective item. And I said, okay, maybe 2020 is when we'll get to that. We got to it in the third quarter of 18. And then 2020 hit, and we sort of went into like silly season. And so those three numbers are now, in just a little over 8 years, they're about 120% of tax receipts. So literally, you hear all the time, we just need to cut spending. We're spending 120% of tax receipts on just three line items: entitlements, uncuttable, defense, third rail, and interest, which in theory is up, is up in a low small because we're trying to fight inflation. So we're actually making the problem worse by fighting inflation because it is already so high. So I think your summary is exactly right. That's what I think of as the pace at which these three line items have gone from 60% to 120%. It's just mind-blowing.
Yeah, and I don't know, if you guys, I know Trump's coming here in a little bit, and listen, I'm sure there's Trump supporters here. First off, I will say it's so great that he's coming here to talk to you guys. Like, give him credit for that. He's coming to earn your vote. Respect that. But man, like, does he need it from you guys? Because I don't even think he gets it, but just the other day speech where he was like, "Inter so high, when I'm in there, they'll blow again." And you're like,
really though.
That's really not the answer either, man. Yeah.
Yeah. It's remarkable how bad and quickly this can steamroll. Like, I feel like, it seemed to be like a social insanity. Like, that there was actually outrage about like a $700 billion spending bill and the bailouts in 2007, 2009 era. That was a huge deal and enormous outrage. Now we just like kind of casually talk about $3 trillion. $6 trillion in a year, and we can't even. I read a piece on the show.
We need to get that Obama fiscal sanity back.
Like, how ridiculous is that? But it's true. We would actually some degree of fiscal sanity if we went back to what sanity used to mean. And I read a piece that was just talking about just a master class and a Ponzi scheme that we're actually dealing with from a financial standpoint, because not only can we not afford our debt, but we are rolling over debt with new debt and issuing new debt on top of it to pay for the interest on the old debt that we're rolling over, and the only people who are buying it is our own central bank. Like, how could you...
This is the Mr. Brownstone economic.
Like, what?
I used to do a little bit, so the little got more.
Yeah. No, if we're all going to be honest, look, the government loots all of people, and then they propagandize your children to worship them for doing it. It's pretty impressive, really, if you think about it.
Good.
I mean,
excellent work.
And then think about the result of all of that. So speaking of out of control, right? Out of control spending, you meant culturally, but it's the growth and the trajectory of size of the government.
Yep.
And that's part of the reason why the spending and the fiscal spending is so out of control. Right. So if you think about that just in size of sheer numbers, if you go back to 1970, before we got off the gold standard, the U.S. government was spending about $4,500 per person. Today, the U.S. government is spending about $19,500 per person. So the size of the government is expanded at a rapid rate. You know, in the book Anatomy of the State, Rothbard talks about the state is somebody. If you guys haven't read that book, anybody read that book, Anatomy of the State? It's like a booklet you can read in like an hour. You totally should.
There's on Bitcoin Audible. You can listen to it.
Yeah, check out Guy reads it. You should listen to it on the way home. But he talks about how the purpose of the state is to not end, and more importantly, to always continue to grow. And so now, it's not that it's just out of control spending, defense spending, interest spending, but now they have to get involved into every cultural part of our lives, micromanage every minutia detail of how we talk, hate speech or whatever it is. So the growth of the government is out of control.
Yeah.
And it's always, you know, the culture war stuff is always easier for people to deal in. Because
easy to digest.
You don't have to really know anything
Yeah.
in order to get into a fight about, like, transgender bathrooms or something like that. And so everybody always gravitates to that. Like, if you were to look on Twitter or something like that, you would think the big battle of our time is between, like, leftists believe gender is a social construct and, like, adcons who think women's space is in the kitchen. Yeah. When both of those views combined represent 1% of the United States of America. I don't even know cultural views of all four people on the panel, but I guarantee neither of us fit into either of those boxes.
Right.
Like, you know what I mean? And then, like, this stuff, dealing with, like, the fiscal implications of where we are or the monetary policy, that's really hard. You got books and you have to really think about it, you know? Those views for people here kind of in that world, and it is so important these issues get pushed into the fore. This is what actually matters. This is why empires collapse, you know? And so...
And it's working. I mean, just, you know, Paul really, I think, brought the Fed to the forefront just, 2009? Yeah, give it up for Ron. And, you know...
There's so much love for that guy. It's been, like, 20 years.
And Luke can probably answer this better than me, but I just don't remember the word fiat or inflation being used in everyday normal lives. Like, normal people didn't talk about these types of things. And to Dave's point, we're pushing it into the forefront. And now it's normal language, and people are starting to understand the mechanisms. And now we can finally kind of push back on that.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I wanted to, especially in social and Twitter and Nostr and, like, all these things, like, I feel like there's a huge mixed bag about how people feel about this conference. And, like, the fact that, you know, Bitcoin's purpose is the separation of money and state. Right? This is about reining them in. And then Trump's on in 2 hours. You know, we got presidential candidates, we got campaign promises, we got politicians galore. Like, and a lot of people are like, is this captured? Is Bitcoin a super PAC now? You know, like, and I'm curious, what do you make of this? Because I've heard a lot of different perspectives, and I'm curious kind of how you see where we are in this transition, and how do you make of kind of the insanity that has really just arisen in this environment in the last, like, 3 to 4 months?
I think the fact that 2 of the 3 major political or presidential candidates are here is, I think it reflects the growing political power, to your point about it being a super PAC. But I don't know that that's the only reason. I think that there is a growing recognition in the halls of power in Washington that recognize the mathematical realities that we just discussed in the first 10 minutes. And I think they are starting to recognize the possible utility of Bitcoin as a least worst way of managing through what is looking increasingly like it's going to be a difficult, bumpy ride for the next 4 to 6 years. And so I think that's a bigger part of it. I'm sure there's, you know, just sort of the base political, hey, Bitcoiners have a lot of money at 70,000 a coin, and, you know, I want to tap that for my campaign. But I do think there is a much greater recognition than most people realize at high levels in Washington that we have a problem, and we don't have a problem in 5 years or 10 years or maybe not even in 2 years. We have a problem very soon.
Now, yeah.
I think in regards to separation of money and state, which that's something I'm very passionate about. I know, Guy, we've talked about this extensively. And when I think about that, I think about removing the money from the hands of the state. Now, why do we have politics here at this event is kind of the question that Guy is posing. And I would say when I think about separation of money and state, it's more about the state being able to create money at will. We want to take away the ink from the money printer and prevent them and force some fiscal responsibility back, right? Prevent that creep of the government because they can always print money for never-ending wars and more cultural programs. However, that doesn't mean we need to abstain from politics. If anything, we, as Bitcoiners who value freedom above everything, should be taking the power back of the political system. So it's not about trying to abstain and go live on a hill, on a rock, and we say that Bitcoin will fix everything, but no. You can't just go take your Bitcoin, hide on a hill, and then Bitcoin magically fixes it. We have to do the work. And so we have to be involved in politics. I think we should unite as a super PAC. I think we should be involved in politics, but take the printing ability away from the government. That's the separation I'm here for.
100%. So that essentially is the only reason why I love Bitcoin. Like, I know there's different reasons why other people like it, and a lot of people have gotten rich off it, and I'm a capitalist. I'm not against getting rich. Good for you guys. If any of you guys have gotten really rich off it, give me money. But I don't like the slogan, Bitcoin fixes everything. I've tried to use it on my wife when she's mad at me, and it doesn't work. So, she's like, you didn't check in and you were out all night, and I'm like, Bitcoin fixes this.
It's okay.
It's not.
It's okay.
But the whole game to me, right? Like why I love Bitcoin and why I think like the potential is so limitless is because like the more you learn about money and government control of money, you realize that is the whole game. Everything else flows from that. Every evil thing that government does is only because they control the money supply. Like, take an evil thing that government does, and I'll explain how it's because they control the money supply, Like, I mean, just think about, like, okay, we fought, like, a catastrophic 20-year war in Afghanistan that literally killed hundreds of thousands of people, cost trillions of dollars, and thousands of our bravest young boys died, and then tens of thousands committed suicide in the wake of the war, right? Well, just like imagine if they couldn't print the money for that war. Right. Imagine if they had to tax the American people every month for the war in Afghanistan. You think that thing would have lasted 20 years?
No way.
You'd have been lucky to get it through a year.
Yeah.
Before the people would have demanded a result. Like, what are you doing here? I mean, just imagine trying to do the lockdowns of 2020 if they couldn't just print trillions of dollars and pass them out. That people wouldn't have taken it. They would have been like, no, we're going back to work. We're not doing this. It's only because they control the money that they can get away with tyranny.
Yeah.
And listen, like, personally, like when I came up as a child of the Ron Paul presidential campaigns. Like, that's how I got interested in all of this stuff. And Ron Paul would always talk about the gold standard at the time. And don't get me wrong, I think a gold standard would be much better than what we have right now. The problem is that historically, what do nations do when they're gold standard and they need to fight a war? Suspend the gold standard. So the difference that what Bitcoin brings is the decentralization. If you were truly on a Bitcoin standard, someone in Washington couldn't just say, we're going off coin standard now. That's the power that Bitcoin has, that you can actually have a chance at separating money in the state. And that is the most important thing in the world today.
I do want to just add,
1,000%.
Yeah, go ahead. I do want to add, Dave, the irony of what Dave said. Started by saying he doesn't like that Bitcoin's everything, but then he went on to describe all the ways Bitcoin
fixes everything.
It doesn't fix everything, just war and tyranny.
Yeah.
And this used to be known, right? Like, you can go back to 1948, you can find it online. Warren Buffett's father, Congressman Howard Buffett, wrote a missive, gold convertible money is essential to freedom. That was the title of the, human depends on gold convertible currency. And, to your point, the gold convertible is a point of risk that had been removed by Bitcoin, as you said. So it literally is the whole game. All the other stuff is just noise to distract from control printer.
Again, though, if you're not all night and don't call your wife, Bitcoin is not going to help you. So I'm just saying. Take that.
It's her Bitcoin then.
But the wild thing about it is that everything is because like all power is about the control of resources. All power is about the control of energy, about our energy, what we actually exert toward. And if we are working for something that someone can print for free, then we are literally working for them. Like, not by choice. We are being coerced into always provide our energy for them, for nothing in return, explicitly. And the kind of the crazy thing in kind of what you were saying in breaking down like what the cost, the true cost of all this is just in totality. Like when we're talking about like a systemic fraud in like a counterfeit situation, is that the problem is a systemic problem. You know, some people will talk to me about how like, oh, we got to deal with fractional reserve in like a bank or in an exchange, or the TF might have some IOUs. But at the end of the day, we know what happens with fractional reserve on top of the Bitcoin standard. It's Mt. Gox. It's FTX. Go out of business. They die. They do not survive at length. Fractional reserve doesn't work if you sound money to at the end of the day. What's happened is that the government system where they have to adhere to reality.
No consequence.
There's no consequence. There's systemic pushback at the very lowest. They have a total and fraud over everything that they lie about, all of their errors. They can always just paper over it.
They did until Bitcoin.
Until Bitcoin. And like you said, that is the problem that Bitcoin is solving.
Well, by the way, just in case you guys know, is that Orange, and he was the one he cast, and I was loosely familiar. I knew a lot of people were into it, but you went on this powerful things I ever heard. When your money is fake, your world is fake, and that there's so much. When you really think about it, money is almost 50% of every transaction. I mean, I guess there's sometimes you trade things for that, but for the overwhelming majority of the time, every economic interaction that you have is trading something for money. And it's like that money itself is a lie.
Yeah.
Like almost every single day you go out and you trade a lie for a freaking vape that I have to go buy after this because they wouldn't let me bring it in to the building.
Thanks, TSA.
I'm going to go trade a lie for nicotine. Something so real as nicotine. I have to trade a lie for that. And there's a profound way in which that corrodes like the national soul when everything you're doing is based off of a scam.
Well, because we believe that money is neutral. It's like a tool. So money could be used for good or money could be used for bad. It's how I use it, but not necessarily. Because the money system that we have today, that would be system, it's built on theft, inflation being theft. It's built on lies and deceit. So then anything built on that system is inherently evil, unfortunately, and it creates all types of perverse outcomes. Luke and I were talking about earlier how the financial system has distorted the entire workforce to where now essential things we need, like welding bridges and building planes that don't fall out of the sky, are deprioritized so we can go work in derivatives trading that does absolutely nothing and provides no value to the world. And so this lies, theft, and deceit has perverted the entire system that we have.
The bloating of the financial system is the worst because all of the new money gets funneled through in a bond, in a loan, and it basically allows them to just consume. And then what are they going to do? They're just going to lend it to giant corporations. Everybody's like, I hate big corporations. It's like big corporations are massive because they have access to money that the rest of us don't have. They get a price that's just not real, and everything just funnels up to them. And you think about like go back like 30 or 40 years, the size of the financial sector as a portion of the economy has grown. Like that it's a way to, there's nothing about finance is inherently valuable in itself. It's managing real resources. That means that it takes us twice as much of our time and energy to do the same job as we used to do.
Well, it's a parasitic industry, right?
And think about it. People get pulled into that industry, right? Like, look, if you're a doctor, you I mean, like your average doctor's salary, they make like a couple $100,000 or something like that.
Specialists about 300 now.
Yeah. Okay. So like, so let's just say $300,000 or something like that, which is like not a bad salary to be making, but it's not, you know, with today's prices, it's not like you're rich if you're making $300,000 a year. You know, you'll bang out your mortgage payment, you'll send your kid to a private school, maybe you take a vacation, and you're out of money at the end of the year. You know, like that's basic. Yet you could go become a multimillionaire on Wall Street. So now all of these, like all the young talent, we're pulling in to this like phony industry that does nothing to create real wealth for people. Whereas like all of like, and nothing against anyone in finance, I understand.
We hate you all.
No, listen, make your money. You know what I mean? Like, you got to make your money. I mean, you're a part of something evil, but make your money in that evil thing. You're destroying the greatest nation ever built. But
make your money.
It's not you. But how much talent is there on Wall Street that if it wasn't for this being such a big part of the economy, they'd be out there actually being productive and improving everybody's life. It's tragic what they've done to us.
I was telling Mark before, right? I know of a situation where there was a medical professional who trained for 16 or 18 years to operate on one of the most sensitive part of the human body. He's probably one of a few thousand people do it globally. And they left that to become a hedge fund analyst in healthcare because they could make more money without the legal risk.
And I was joking before. I don't begrudge that guy. He's trying to give his family the best life he can.
It makes sense. He is simply reacting to the perverted incentives of the system. And
I mean, is he supposed to give that up when that's good for him? Like that's the whole thing, right? Guide us in the wrong direction to do what's best for us, which becomes at odds with the rest of society, because the price signal for what everyone actually values is bullshit.
So let's flip this for a second, guy, because we're running down on time.
Yeah, we are running out of time.
And changing the incentive structure, and we have massive growth and massive hope ahead.
Yeah. I would just, because that's such a good point, that it's like you also recognize, I mean, there's so much beauty around us. It's so amazing to be alive today. Like, I'll tell, my son had a congenital heart defect that if I had lived at any time except for the last 20 years, I would have lost my son. And he's fine. He's going to live a totally normal life now because the things they can do today are incredible. We have all this amazing stuff around us. If we just fixed the money, we could live in an unprecedented boom time.
Just do more of that.
You can't even imagine. It would be considered magic 100 years ago to have what we have now. And we've got the answer. And it's cool to have a group of people who all know what it is coming together, you know?
Hell yeah. Well, maybe since we really short on time, maybe just close this out with, 2020 it felt like a turning point. Both for the government kind of just going unrestricted, like you're going to do what we say, and when someone brings up your rights, it's not even something we pander to anymore, it's something we laugh at, and we accuse you of being selfish because you're not doing what the state wants you to. So we have moved aggressively in the wrong direction in kind of one realm. But at the same time, many millions of people woke up and they were like, what in the hell is happening here? And we've kind of got these two paths, and maybe my question is simply, are we going down both of these paths at the same time? Is one winning, or are we just separating into two worlds? Like maybe give me a little bit of hope or a little bit of realism for where you think we are in this.
Well, listen, I'll just say this. I'll be quick, and then you guys can finish. But I'd say this, right? And I've been a very sharp critic of Donald Trump for years, and many of his policies that I didn't agree with, both domestic and foreign policy. The fact that Donald Trump is the candidate who the entire corporate media is telling you you're not allowed to support that guy. The CIA and the big banks and big pharma and all the power centers are saying you're not allowed to support that guy. And that he is winning so dominantly right now is such a great sign for this country. Yeah. If nothing else, just that people are like, screw you, we're not listening to you. I love that.
Yeah, I think that was somebody made a comment that I thought was great, was like, appreciate someone if they have the right enemies.
I mean, I've said many times, if if the media wanted Trump out of the race, they should just endorse him.
That's great.
But in terms of the two paths,
probably work.
I think we're running two on podcasts with Mark and we're riding two horses with one ass, and it's ultimately you can only ride one horse with one ass, and the horses are increasingly bolting in two different directions. And I think this is true of the fiscal side and the economic side, which is where I've mainly used the terms, but I think it's true socially, etc. And so I think we can ride these two horses with one ass for a bit longer, but a decision point is coming. And I think what we decide is in part the actions everybody takes individually in terms of how you vote with your wallet with a Bitcoin, who you vote for, how you act locally, how you raise your children. I mean, it's not one thing. I mean, the biggest thing people can do is raise your children well. Or that's the biggest, raise your children well, the problem will fix itself. So, and I think what we decide
I'm optimistic,
but I'm cautiously optimistic.
The actions everybody takes individually.
And I would add, Guy said it perfectly, and I agree with, like, the tide, as I always say, the pendulum is starting to swing back. And he said that a lot of people woke up, 2020 was a big wake-up call for a lot of people. But really what the state wants, if you look at the Bolshevik Revolution or you look at Mao's Great Leap Forward, the state wants to censor you, they want to keep you quiet, and they want everyone to conform in a perfect box. And the reason why is because if one person can break out of that, if they can break through into living truth as opposed to living a lie, everyone else can see that, and they want that as well. And we've been sort of in this censored bubble, if you will, and Elon Musk has been standing against the world in the front of that and has shifted the window just a little bit. It's not open censorship. I mean, there's still censorship, but just a little bit has started to change it. Now we have Mark Zuckerberg who's like, oh, wait a minute. I guess I could stand up a little bit to this. And as Luke said, it's about our kids, but it's about each one of us. And so I like to say that your silence makes you complicit. And so you don't have to stand up and be vocal, but you could at least cast doubt. Oh, I'm not sure if I agree with that. But it's about us all waking up one by one. It's us all standing up to the face of that, at least casting doubt, if not opposing it directly. Yeah. And we'll shift that tide back.
Yeah. Hell yeah. Well, guys, without a doubt, the government is out of control. I think we recognize this. We see it in a million different ways. But I tell you what, every time I go to a Bitcoin conference and I come hang out with people, I feel like it gets more and more wild just every single time. And it's absolutely crazy that I was just chatting with my brother while we were walking over here, that we found Bitcoin in 2011. And we were sitting in our trailer, poor nobodies, like just talking about this thing, and we described this day. We described the fact that like eventually it was going to be here, and it's just so unreal to actually see it. And everybody that I talk to is absolutely as busy as they can be. Everybody's got 10 projects. Everybody's trying to build everything under the sun. And I swear to God, if the government can be reined in, like, it's gonna happen with this group of people. Like, if it can happen, why not us? Why not us? So, I just want to say thank you guys. Dave, it's so awesome to actually finally meet you in person, brother.
It's great to meet you in person.
Luke, Mark, thank you so much for joining me. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, guys. Thank you, everybody.
Have a great rest of the day.
Oh, that went by quick.
That went by quick.
The Bitcoin Conference. We started with a dream to build a community focused on Bitcoin. Kickstarted a revolution. And then Miami, a place where enthusiasts, developers, dreamers, and innovators could come together to make Bitcoin better. It has been an amazing 5 years and 8 conferences, thanks to all of you. Bitcoin Conference has become the largest premier global Bitcoin gathering in the world, leading hyper-Bitcoinization. While Miami was incredible, it was time to set the stage for Bitcoin in a new city. So we took the conference on the road. Nashville, Tennessee was the obvious choice, a city known for music and freedom. Next year, the conference is hitting the road again in search of the next global stage. We are headed to a new city next year. With hyper-Bitcoinization right around the corner, we have no plans to take the foot off the gas. Find out where we are headed next. Scan the QR code and be at the main stage for the big announcement.
Welcome back to the Mara News Desk, powered by Bitcoin Magazine. Once again, I'm your host, Pete Rizzo, editor at Bitcoin Magazine. The grand finale of Bitcoin 2024 happening today. You saw Howard Lutnick, CEO at Cantor Fitzgerald, Ro Khanna, Democratic Congressman from California, still to come, Marsha Blackburn, Vivek Ramaswamy, and, of course, what everyone is here for, and the lines that are stretching around the venue, the 45th President of the United States, Donald J. Trump. We've got an all-star panel now coming from the opposite political spectrum. Jason Mayer to my left, author of The Progressive Case for Bitcoin, available at Bitcoin Magazine Books at bitcoinmagazine.com. And to his left, Bradley Redler, Associate Professor of Philosophy at the University of Wyoming.
That's right.
Welcome, guys.
Thank you.
Obviously, want to talk about the feeling around this venue, about what's going on. Red hats everywhere. We saw earlier a man holding a sign, Scamala. Obviously, there's dissatisfaction with the current administration here at Bitcoin 2024. So let's get into the message that Trump is sending by being here and just what you're feeling as people who are coming from the Democratic persuasion. Jason.
Sure. So I think the fact that Trump has embraced Bitcoin is a really wake-up call for people on the left, Democrats, who actually care about getting elected and really want to see this technology blossom. So I was very happy today to see examples of Democratic Congress people on the stage Bitcoin conference, talking about a crypto reset, Bitcoin reset, common sense regulation that goes along with Bitcoin. From the left, and I do feel like we have a lot of great news and optimism that there will be a reset, and the Harris campaign might actually be more open than we thought to some of these ideas.
Well, Democrats on stage today calling for a great reset, but let's be honest, Bradley, it's the conversations are tough right now. How is it in your life, just the idea that you're coming to a conference that Donald J. Trump is speaking at?
Yeah, it's difficult to explain in the same sentence why I am in favor of Bitcoin and why Donald Trump is in favor of Bitcoin. But I think that when I explain the reasons I'm in favor of it, people get it. And when I talk to my students who are young and a combination of conservative and liberal, I'm at the University of Wyoming, they immediately understand why a private, censorship-resistant digital cash is important. I think it's a mistake to think that President Trump understands Bitcoin very well, but what he does understand is what people have told him about Bitcoin and just how many people are in favor of it and how many people disagree with the current administration's policies. Hopefully, Kamala Harris can take that on board as well, and people can explain to her why the progressive case for Bitcoin is such an important case to make.
Well, conservative activists on stage earlier today, Scott Pressler, his argument to the people on the desk watching at home on YouTube, X, and Rumble that Bitcoin is inherently conservative, that it's pro-freedom, it requires less government, and that people who are conservative should be pro-Bitcoin, and the people who are liberal are naturally not. Jason, your reaction?
Couldn't disagree more. I feel like, things like freedom and transparency, all of the values that Bitcoin stands for, fits perfectly well within a progressive mind frame, and that's why I work so hard to just educate people as much as I can about how you can view Bitcoin through really any lens that you want. And if you see a problem in the world, and our current financial system is a problem in the world, Bitcoin has a response to that.
But Bitcoin, as the nature of it, the technology just has less government involvement, right? It removes the government's ability, or it is a system of money without a government in it, and thus is new. Brad, your take?
In my opinion, I think that people people link too closely progressivism with government involvement, and the early progressive movement was not about governments. It was a system built alongside governments because people recognized that governments were not serving who they were supposed to be serving, and that is obviously still the case. So I think the progressive case for Bitcoin is not a pro-government case. It's particular progressive issues that we think Bitcoin actually helps with.
Well, obviously, Joe Biden resigning or dropping out of the 2024 race. How does a new nominee undo the mistakes of the Biden administration? Jason, what are you saying?
Yeah, so I feel like it's a perfect opportunity to actually do the reset that we've been talking about. We heard this morning that the Democratic Congress, like groups of Democrats, are actually reaching out to the DNC to push these pro-crypto, pro-Bitcoin like policies at the party level. So I'm optimistic about that. And just, to speak to the progressive values, I feel like Bitcoin is a tool that will allow us to have a more efficient, more fair, more transparent government. Not that we need more government, but it will allow us to actually have a better functioning government.
Going quickly to our roving reporter in just a minute, but want to stick with our panel right now. This idea that Bitcoin voters are single-issue voters, and the risk that if Democrats don't appeal to these single-issue voters, they could lose a crucial swing vote. Bradley, your take on the idea, what should the Democrats be afraid of losing the Bitcoin vote?
I think that it would be great to have more polling on how many people are single-issue voters on Bitcoin or crypto. I think the polling data does tell us that a lot of people who own Bitcoin consider it very important that the administration that they vote for has positive Bitcoin policies. And so I think it's important for the candidates to understand what people are thinking about with respect to Bitcoin, as well as the other issues that they're interested in. And if it turns out that a lot of people are single-issue Bitcoin voters, then they need to know that as well. And so hopefully they have polling out there that will tell them.
Jason, your quick thoughts. Should Democrats be concerned that they might lose Bitcoin voters? Is that a crucial swing vote in your opinion?
Yeah, it is actually. And I wrote my book and I talked to progressives about Bitcoin all the time because I was hoping that it wouldn't come to pass, right? I was hoping that we could get Democrats on board with a Bitcoin before it became a political.
We're on the conference floor in the middle of the electricity, taking you inside the action right now. We'll be right back.
Thanks, Rizzo. I'm here now with Joey Garcia, the Director and Chief Legal at Zappo. Tell you guys a little bit more about Zappo and its unique offering.
So look, Zappo's been in the space for a long time, right? We were the biggest Bitcoin custodian in the world. We are a Bitcoin native business that's become a bank. So let's call it Bitcoin private banking. Developed back in the old days, we were, as I said, the largest. We sold the institutional business to Coinbase to focus on that retail market. And now, where do people keep, store? What is the value proposition to protect and grow your wealth with a Bitcoin asset exposure in a way that's integrated to your bank account and the services you need? That's what we do. And, we're very proud of the offering. We're the only company in the world really to be able to do that. So we're talking about fully blockchain integrated payment rails, stablecoin payment integrators to your bank account, and secure exposure to BTC in a savings account that's earning interest to you at no risk. So we're Bitcoin native, gone into banking. We're not a bank looking to explore exposure to BTC. That's our identity. That's who we are. We've been in the game for a long time, and we're here to stay.
Amazing. Back to you guys at the desk.
what is money and how does it get value? Paper money has value because someone says so. Bitcoin is different. It's like digital gold. It has value for many of the reasons gold does, but that's only the start. It has a limited supply, only 21 million, so no one can decide to just print more. Because no central authority, it can never be shut down. And unlike with banks and credit card companies, you don't need approval to use it. It puts the power back in all our hands. Bitcoin lets you control your finances. Kraken lets you buy Bitcoin. Kraken, see what crypto can be.
Welcome back to the Mara News Desk at Bitcoin 2024. Of course, action happening around Music City Center now. We're sending it over to the Nakamoto stage. You're going to hear from Alex Gladstein of the Human Rights Foundation. His talk, Bitcoin, Global Utility Power, happening now.
But there's been no sort of capitalist incentive to get these people power until now. So what we're going to talk about is how one of the use cases of Bitcoin, in addition to being freedom money, in addition to connecting anybody in the world to one open global marketplace on one currency that can't be stopped, is that it also is going to end up bringing power to every single person in Africa who doesn't have power. That's going to happen over the next few decades, and Bitcoin mining is going to do it. I was invited by Eric Hirschman and Janet and Philip and their team from Gridless to visit this remarkable place at the base of Mount Moulange. It's the highest peak in southern Africa, one of the most stunning places I've ever seen. I mean, it rivals Yosemite. There's very few people there because there's very little infrastructure there. What you see here is a little canyon, and there's a river running through it. And at that river site, about 20 years ago, the Scottish government decided to think about funding what's called a micro-hydro station. Okay, so it's like a small off-grid site where the running water is converted to electricity for the people who are nearby. Because it's what's called concessional financing, which is what powers most energy projects across the rural world, all across the planet, from Latin America to Southeast Asia, concessional financing basically just means donation. Somebody's just giving money. They don't have skin in the game. They're not going to fund OPEX. They're only going to fund CAPEX. So first of all, it took them about 15 years to get this off the ground. These people in Bondo didn't have electricity until a couple years ago because there was no skin in the game. The Scottish government wasn't going to make money from this venture. The incentives were not aligned. But we went up to the top of the reservoir. This is where the river comes down, and the river flows down through the turbines, and it looks like this inside the little hut. And you know what? There's just a profound problem that you realize when you visit a site like this. The people in the town and the village and the local merchants and the local businesses, they sleep every night. They don't use power at night. So there's very little power demand in the evening, but the river never sleeps. So at night, there's just all this wasted energy. And you start to realize every single energy production site on Earth wastes energy. We waste so much energy. And today, because of what Gridless is doing, there's a Bitcoin mine there. And the Bitcoin network is buying 100% of the electricity that the town and the surrounding area doesn't use. And this is completely transformative for a variety of reasons. Yeah, shout out to Gridless. So amazing. So what's happening here is a couple things. Number one, for the local power company, which used to basically be a charitable project, they're no longer paying everything out of their own pocket. They have a new source of income, which is all the Bitcoin coming in from the mining operation, from all the electricity that wasn't used before. And we're talking the majority of electricity that this place generates was going wasted, and now it's all being bought by the Bitcoin network. And here's the kicker. They're not being paid in kwacha, the currency in Malawi that's collapsing. They're being paid in cold hard Bitcoin and sats directly to their offices. They don't need to deal with accountants and paperwork and Forex. No, they just get Bitcoin. It's incredibly powerful for these people. So it allows them to have capital. Now the local power company can think about building, and they are expanding, and they're going to connect more homes. Gridless, the company that owns the miners, they're also winning. They're going to come in, and within a year or two at these sites, they're profitable, which is amazing. And number three, most importantly, probably for most of you, the local residents. Now, the local residents We got to meet the chieftains of the village at a meeting. It was very special. It was very profound. And what's really amazing is they're paying less now for the electricity. What happens, it's sort of counterintuitive. The media will tell you, oh, the Bitcoin miners are coming in and they're making electricity more expensive. That's completely false. That's not what happens at all. What's actually happening here is that because the power company can only sell about 20% of what it makes to the local population because there's just not that much demand, it ends up charging 5 times more for the price. So these guys are paying 80 cents a kilowatt hour for electricity in the middle of nowhere, even though they're surrounded by energy. Meanwhile, here in the States, I know the prices have been going up lately, but in the advanced democratic world, we pay, I don't know, anywhere from 10 to 30 cents. So despite the fact that they're so poor and vulnerable, they're paying way more than us. This doesn't make any sense. We were led to believe that we are in progress around the world. Electricity and technology was supposed to get cheaper. For them, it's getting more expensive. And Bitcoin changes that, and it's so profound. And look, they weren't Bitcoin experts, but they knew what it was doing to their community, and they knew that electricity was the thing that mattered almost the most. I mean, the stories they told us about how it's changed their town. I mean, children that couldn't study at night. They had to try. They are now, the rate at which their children are now getting into the good schools has skyrocketed since they got electricity. They no longer have to walk to surrounding villages 20 kilometers to get medicine. Funnily enough, the men who used to go to town to watch football, they can be at home with their families and really build family and build community. So, Bitcoin is changing everything for this little town. And this is just one example of what is happening all across Africa and soon all across the developing world. And one of the most interesting things that I sort of observed here is when you go to the back of the Bitcoin mine, you put your hand up, it's a furnace. It's so hot. The externality of Bitcoin, they figured out, wait a second, we can actually use that. So what you're seeing here is 1,000 miles north of Malawi in the Democratic Republic of the Congo in Virunga National Park, which is where the silverback gorillas are, and 5 million people live in there. The miners were like, no, don't do that. Buy $200,000 of ASICs instead. And that's what they did. And now they're processing cocoa way faster, way more efficiently, and it turns into this beautiful chocolate, which I was able to eat. It's incredible. This chocolate is made by Bitcoin mining. I visited sites in Norway where the externality of all the hydro mining they do is drying seaweed. It's going to be profit of Bitcoin mining plus profit of the externality minus the cost. And this is going to change everything. I encourage you to watch a Reason documentary about a bathhouse in Brooklyn that's heating the spa where you go with Bitcoin mining. Now than he did before, plus he's mining Bitcoin. So this is just going to revolutionize everything. What you start to realize is if you're not mining Bitcoin, you're wasting energy. And that's the exact opposite of what the media tells you. I also got an opportunity to visit a geothermal site in Kenya. So this is just very simple. They dig a very deep hole in the ground, heat comes up, it turns into steam, it spins a turbine. This thing is going to generate the same amount of power for the next 40 years. Clean, consistent, renewable, carbon-free, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And they have so much of it in Kenya. It's one of the world's largest sources of geothermal power. It's right on the Rift Valley. And, one thing I learned when I was there, was really surprised by, is Kenya's the world's largest exporter of flowers. So what happens is they take the geothermal or the hydro, and they power pumps like this, which is on a lake. And they pump the water to a field, and they grow flowers, and they sell it to Europe or wherever. And that's like how the country, earns income, essentially. And, what's amazing is that you start to realize there's no grid here. So it's not like they can sell the excess power to somebody else. No. This is like rural Kenya. And on the right, you'll see a shack that has the pump inside. And the pump's not on all the time, right? The pump's pumping sometimes, not pumping other times. But the geothermal power is constant. It's always coming. It's always coming. So on the left, and we'll just kind of zoom in here, that's a Starlink, and that's sitting on top of a Bitcoin mine. And the most amazing thing is that this thing is buying, again, 100% of the power that the pump's not using. So all of a sudden, we've eliminated waste and more efficient as a species. And honestly, it's going to create so much abundance because it's going to unlock people's ability to use all the electricity sources around them. So you can see inside, we got some miners here. This is so cool. What Gridless does is everything's made in Africa. Like the whole design they have, everything's made in Africa. And this is like a chart on one of the founder's phones he was showing me, where if you look at this thing and there's this green line going up and down, above the red, that's all when the Bitcoin mining machines are turned on. So they're mining whenever that green line goes above the red line. And when it goes below the red line, the machines aren't on. And it's just this dynamic, flexible power demand source that's paying the company that runs the station, it's paying gridless, and it's reducing the cost of power for anyone else in the region. I mean, it's sort of magical, but that's what Bitcoin mining is. But it's not just going to solve issues in Kenya or in Malawi. It's going to solve issues here too. So this is I live in California, and this is a chart that I was really shocked by. So this is from the California, grid, basically. And between 2019 and 2023, in America, we use the word curtailment instead of waste because it's sort of like a euphemism, right? Curtailed. But we were wasting millions of megawatt hours of energy. So, I mean, this is massive amounts of energy that we are wasting in our country. And, just to give you an idea, in 2021, my state curtailed 1,500 kilowatt hours of solar and wind. That's enough to power 220,000 homes for a year. In the Southwest Power region, which is sort of in the middle of the country, nearly 6,300 kilowatt hours of wind was curtailed. That's enough to power 600,000 homes for a year. And, this is not just American problem, it's a problem all over the world. The UK, get this, the UK spent 500 million pounds wasting wind energy in 2021. How insane is that? And the crazy part is Bitcoin fixes this. We don't need to do this anymore. We can just run all of this renewable energy all the time, and whatever isn't bought by whoever is there, the Bitcoin network is going to buy and turn into capital for more growth and more abundance, and so we can continue to grow as a civilization. This is a chart from a book called Resistance Money. I really would encourage you to pick up a copy. It's a phenomenal book. And what you see here in the white is how much energy Bitcoin consumes, right? So compared to like big one, chemicals, iron and steel. The difference is, as I've been trying to explain, Bitcoin mining saves wasted energy. So, I know that the media and the government want you to look at this and be like, oh my God, this is terrible. Bitcoin mining uses so much energy. We actually want that circle to be as big as possible, because the bigger Bitcoin mining is, the healthier we are going to be as a society. I wanted to sort of dive into this a little bit. This is something some of you may have seen, this image. And people always say, well, we could always create a solar grid the size of this square and power the world in the Sahara Desert. Well, you can't do that because that's not how solar energy works. Now, fossils do work that way, right? So you can dig fossils out of the ground in Algeria, and in fact, a lot of that powers all kinds of stuff in the United States. And the interesting thing here is that fossils are more modular, right? So fossils, we don't tend to waste. We're not going to just waste a bunch of fossil fuels. We use them, and we use them carefully. And when the oil exporters sense that the market is weak, they stop digging it out of the ground. There's a much sort of tighter relationship with fossils and the way we use fossils. So long term, fossils aren't necessarily really going to power Bitcoin mining. What Bitcoin mining is going to feast on is renewable energy and baseload power, like nuclear and potentially, of course, hydro, geothermal, biomass. I mean, because God controls that stuff. We don't. It's sunny, it's not sunny, it's windy, it's not windy. We can't control that. But Bitcoin can buy everything that's consumed. So this is something we're going to start to understand. And look, these countries, if they wanted to, they could turn all that stuff into capital with Bitcoin mining. And I want us to sort of try to rewire our brains here. So this is a New York Times article, where they're trying to scare you about Bitcoin mining. And they're saying, Bitcoin uses more electricity than many countries. How is that possible? Well, what if they said this? What if they said Bitcoin saves more electricity than many countries? That's super exciting, right? Here's another one. Bitcoin consumes more electricity than Argentina. Oh my God, that's horrible. Well, what if Bitcoin saves more electricity than Argentina? That's incredible, right? So we need to rewire our brains and understand that one of the most profound use cases for wasted energy and understanding that, listen, man, if you're not mining Bitcoin, you're wasting energy. So that's sort of the deal. Just to conclude, that today and yesterday combined is sort of one big talk about all the use cases of Bitcoin that you may not hear about. Again, we understand savings, but there are so many use cases for this thing that's so valuable. And the fact that Warren Buffett and Bill Gates and all these people, Jamie Dimon, they get up there and they tell you it's useless. The Fed tells you it's useless. The Atlantic magazine tells you it's useless. They're either getting it. It is so useful to so many people around the world, whether it be because they don't have the financial privilege that we have. They don't have access to the dollar economy. They don't have access to the stock markets. They just might have terrible paper money that collapsed. Technology might be sheet metal or cows. For so many people in this world, that is the technology they're using to save, and Bitcoin dramatically upgrades them. And again, the commercial aspect of it, like think even just about remote work. Like when you have got an international company, you're paying somebody in some other country, it's such a nightmare to pay them. Bitcoin just cuts through all that nonsense, and it can really empower so many people in that sense. It's so bad for dictators. It is something that transfers power from the state to the people, and that's something that they are very scared of. As we move through this transitionary time, it's going to be more clear that only countries that have values like property rights, freedom, and it promotes human rights in every corner of the world where no one else is willing to help. We're talking about North Korea, Gaza, all over, Venezuela, places that no aid organization can reach, places that no one really cares about due to whatever reason. Bitcoin is there every day helping people. It is such a profoundly good thing for you to invest in. And from a government's point of view, it's neutral and it's incorruptible. There's only ever going to be 21 million Bitcoin. No bureaucrat can change that. No one can inflate it if they want to. It's one open standard for everyone. So kind of the funniest thing here is that for all this talk about ESG, Bitcoin is the best ESG investment on the planet. And the funny thing is, we're gonna start to figure this out. Okay, so it's already happening, right? So we have the former president of the United States about to come speak. We have governors. The governor of Tennessee came and spoke at a Bitcoin event yesterday with someone from the Tennessee Valley Authority and one of the senators from this great state. We have nations mining Bitcoin, not just what I showed you today. The government of Kenya is turning its waste into Bitcoin. The government of Ethiopia is doing this. There are all kinds of governments mining all around the world. This thing's already starting to happen. So we're seeing political adoption. We're seeing, of course, we have Wall Street adoption, and we have nation-state mining adoption. This is happening. So this is not something for you to sleep on. And again, it's so profoundly exciting because it provides us a new way to progress as humans where we don't have to rely on altruism. The reason why there's 600 to 700 million people without power in Africa today is because it requires altruism to give them power. It requires them to make a donation where they're not going to get anything back in a capitalistic sense. Bitcoin completely rewires the situation. It completely changes the system where now people are going to come in and give power to all those other people, and they're going to make money doing it. So it's basically this incredible machine that turns self-interest into freedom. And I couldn't be more happy to be here to help talk through these things with you guys. I hope to see you next time. Thanks so much, Nashville.
All right, Bitcoiners, was that a good morning? That's for all the speakers this morning.
So, what is money?
Welcome back to the Mara News Desk, powered by Bitcoin Magazine. I'm your host, Pete Rizzo, editor of Bitcoin Magazine. It's the grand finale of Bitcoin 2024 here in Nashville, Tennessee. I've got another all-star panel reacting to that great on-stage talk by Alex Gladstein of the Human Rights Foundation. We've got Marty Bent, managing partner at 1031. We've got Efrat Fenningson, host of the You Are the Voice podcast. Of course, it's electric in here. Lines around the venue, red hats everywhere you look. Trump obviously sending a big message being here. He'll be speaking in just hours. And of course, rumors that he'll be creating a National Strategic Bitcoin Reserve. Let's start there with the panel. What do you expect to see from Trump? Marty, I know that you are enthusiastic about Donald J. Trump's speech.
I am. I'm interested to see what he said. I have no idea what he's going to say exactly. I think he's going to posture that he's receptive to Bitcoin. Obviously, everything he's done in the last few months has been signaling towards that direction.
Well, he came out strongly negative against Bitcoin originally, right? There was his famous quote where he prefers the dollar and then the pivot. So how authentic is this pivot in your esteem?
I don't know. He had Steve Munchenbutts behind him as Secretary of Treasury his last administration, so I think he had some bad influence on him. But no, I think...
And he had David Bailey on his ear.
Even a rumor that he was looking to ban Bitcoin coming out from a certain executive in the industry.
You know, maybe he did his research. Maybe he did his research, but no, I don't know what he's going to say.
60 million cryptocurrency holders in the U.S. That's massive, and that's the beginning of the domino effect that we're going to see worldwide. That's what I reckon.
And are already seeing, of course, with El Salvador. We heard from Max and Stacy on stage earlier. Want to recap to yesterday. Obviously, the big news: independent presidential candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr. giving 4 executive orders. Just going to recap them for the folks at home. Signing an executive order, or promising to sign an executive order, that the U.S. Treasury will purchase 550 Bitcoin daily, more than the current supply that is produced, and amass 4 million Bitcoin. Why, as a Bitcoin user, should you support this? Marty, I thought we were talking about decentralization. I thought we wanted the people to rise up against oppressive power structures.
Well, as a Bitcoiner, you want this to happen because it pumps your bags. If they're going to go out there and say, we're going to buy 550 a day, that sends a message out to other governments. Will it centralize the network? I don't know. Will they be able to get the 4 million if you make that announcement? I doubt it. Everything's good for Bitcoin. Pete, you're a Bitcoin historian. We've been talking about this game theory for years. We have been saying for over a decade and a half that eventually the governments will bend the knee to Bitcoin. It seems like it may be happening.
Efrat, the message that sends to the world, even just a presidential candidate, putting out a number of how much Bitcoin the U.S. could or should or would acquire.
That's amazing as an awareness, just general awareness for the public, not even knowing. Most people don't even know what self-custody is. So when Trump goes out there and said, I'm going to help you get self-custody over your Bitcoin, most of his voters are looking at that going, what is self-custody? That's a great question to be with. So I think that's a great sign for Bitcoiners all over the world, because you all want your value to go up.
Well, let's go back to the 550 Bitcoin daily. Marty, you're obviously a Bitcoin expert. How would the government go about acquiring 550 Bitcoin daily?
That's a good question. I think they'd have to connect with some OTC desk and get some liquidity there. And I don't think they'd be able to do that for a certain period of time. But eventually, you're going to get front run. How long is it going to take you acquiring 550 Bitcoin a day to get to 4 million? It's going to take many years. And by the time you're at the tail end of that, the price should be significant.
As a contrast,
So yeah, I just watched Max and Stacy, and what they're describing, Max was actually saying we're going to open a Bitcoin bank in El Salvador. That was his last statement. So they're going to be building a lot more infrastructure over what they're doing with Bitcoin as a treasury in El Salvador, and I think people have to continue watching El Salvador. It's the hottest place right now.
Well, El Salvador actually had a great conversation with Madex from Bull Bitcoin yesterday and what they've built for the community.
These are in contrast to government initiatives. So why, as a Bitcoin voter, do you want the government to get involved in promoting Bitcoin? Shouldn't we want the government to be out of our money? And isn't that what Bitcoin did as a technology?
Well, I think this is a recognition of the government, right? Bitcoin is a separation of money and state, and I think many people are conflating government support with government mingling in money. But as we know with Bitcoin, if it's sufficiently distributed, decentralized, the government, even if they're acquiring Bitcoin, cannot have influence. They may try to pressure, but it's very hard, and it is important that as the government gets in, we as Bitcoiners stay vigilant and protect the sanctity of the protocol.
And very different than other alternative cryptocurrency networks. Of course, we're going to send it to roving reporter Q Gahimi, who's around the venue right now, interacting with the folks, giving you a slice of what it's like to be here in Nashville, Tennessee. We'll be right back with more of this conversation.
Welcome back to Bitcoin 2024 in Nashville, brought to you by Mara. I am joined now with the head of comms for the Bitcoin conference, Christina, to tell us a little bit more about all the press that we have joining us at this conference this year.
Thanks, Stu, for having me. So, yes, we have so many media coming in to this conference. We have 900 press pass holders. Basically, all the big mainstream media is here, and we are looking into orange pilling those media and, showing them how important the industry is, how it has grown, and all the important politicians, speakers, industry leaders, community builders that are here.
Awesome. And of course, everyone is clamoring to hear Donald Trump speak later this afternoon. why don't we talk a little bit about some of the names that have joined us? Because this is not just, the random outlets that have joined in years past.
Absolutely. So we have, from CNN, ABC, Fox, basically the whole alphabet of the mainstream media in the United States and internationally. And we also have many industry media recognized, including Bitcoin Magazine. So this is going to be really big.
Look, you got mainstream media now joining us. It looks like Bitcoin Magazine has thrown one hell of a party that mainstream media wants to join us. Thank you guys so much. Smash that subscribe button down below.
Welcome back to the Mara News Desk. We're deep in a conversation about Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and his Bitcoin policy proposals. I'm here with Marty Bent, managing partner at 1031 Ventures, Efrat Fenningson, host of the You Are the Voice podcast. We're talking now, of course, about Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Spoke yesterday and his appeal to the Bitcoin voter that he is a believer. Efrat, let's take it with you. Would you believe this?
I do believe him. He's a very sincere person, and I think he's not like any other politician. I'm watching this from the sidelines, and RFK would have gotten my vote if I was a voter in the U.S. I think the fact that he got each one of his 7 children to Bitcoin each already about a year ago, that means a lot, and he's there, I think.
Also saying he'd sign an executive order directing the IRS to essentially stop what's happening now where purchases are being taxed with capital gains. Marty, can you dive into this policy point?
I mean, this would be massive. This is one of the things that is really prohibiting Bitcoin to be facilitated as a medium of exchange. People are afraid to spend their Bitcoin because they know when they go to spend it or sell it, they're going to have to pay capital gains tax on that sell. So I think whether it's accumulating Bitcoin or eliminating the capital gains, I think obviously accumulating Bitcoin would be a great first step to eliminate those.
And don't we want Bitcoin to be used as a payment, Efrat?
Sure. I just want to add on to that. You see that already happening in Spain and in Portugal. They don't have capital gains if you hold your Bitcoin more than a year. And that's a great incentive for people to start holding. So, yeah. And yeah, we wanted people to start using it as payments.
Big and bold. Buying 550 Bitcoin a day, 4 million Bitcoin strategic reserve, 200,000 Bitcoin he wants to keep inside the U.S. Marty, how does Trump top this? As someone who's looking forward to Donald J. Trump's speech, is there pressure now for him to confirm that he would, or affirm that he would buy Bitcoin?
Well, we know Trump is a man of imperatives, and he's very bombastic. I think
the fact that he's here, the fact that people are watching him, the cues here are amazing. People are not aware of what's happening here. It's quite insane. The whole world is watching right now, so I think this is an historical moment. He doesn't have to do much. He just has to not fuck it up. That's what.
Well, the elephant in the room, or I guess the donkey, if you prefer, our different partisan theme animals. Kamala Harris, rumored this week to be in discussions to come to Bitcoin 2024. We saw signs protesting, mocking her. How does the current administration shift course? Can they shift course? Marty, what would Kamala Harris have to do for you to vote for her from a Bitcoin perspective?
You'd have to create a time machine and have her change the trajectory of her life from the past up to this point, because I don't think she has a good record on Bitcoin or anything for that matter. I don't think she is very popular. I don't view her as somebody who is smart and wise and should be leading the country. So I don't think anything outside of time machine can change my mind.
So your vote's locked in, but it sounds like you're hoping to see some progress from the Democrats, right? That would be good for Bitcoin.
There was a letter. Did you see the letter came out this morning? No. There was a letter from the DNC signed by, I believe, 30 Democrat politicians, basically compelling the Democratic Party to shift course away from Elizabeth Warren's saber rattling.
Anti-crypto army that she's building.
Yes.
Interesting.
Yes.
That mind virus is trickling down. I'm telling you, they're all going to go into Bitcoin finally. They have no choice.
Let's dive into a specific point that's a little bit maybe more from a Bitcoin and crypto perspective divisive. Obviously, one of the things that is not liked about the current administration is Gary Gensler, but
Democrats trying to posture to crypto more broadly, and that is what is at risk here. I don't know if you saw.
Well, isn't Trump posturing to crypto broadly? I mean, he's accepting Shiba Inu. If you want to donate to Donald Trump today, he will take your Shiba Inu.
The big problem is the crypto lobby is trying to get the CFTC to regulate spot Bitcoin, which would be a big problem. So that's something everybody should be aware of. The politicians here pumping Bitcoin is a great thing, but there are things going on behind the scenes that you should be aware of.
Also, Donald Trump, his personal journey, didn't it begin in some ways with NFTs? His NFT collection that sold out. Efrat, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that the fact that he's already into it, this is great. I think he got one or two things during the past few months. So I think the fact that he's into Bitcoin right now and talking more about Bitcoin, so from Bitcoin is a good start. I'm not entirely sure that he's going to deliver on his promises, but I think the fact that people are aware of Bitcoin through him is a massive.
But we've seen RFK phase shift a little bit on this as well, talking about 4 million Bitcoin here at the consensus conference, putting the government budget on a blockchain. I mean, Marty, isn't there a bit of a problem here where we're getting, we get paid lip services to our voters?
Yeah, it's definitely a potential. Stay vigilant. As you know, Bitcoin...
You're not worried that Trump could take the same approach?
He definitely could. That's why we got to stay vigilant. That's why I'm happy Bitcoin Magazine has made a very concerted effort to make sure that he's getting correct guidance on these subjects. Not everybody's going to get Bitcoin at once. It is confusing. It is something that you need to spend time on. And this week, I've met a lot of senators, congressmen that are really passionate about this as well, and they've been engaging the Bitcoin community all throughout the week, and that is promising. Not everybody's going to be perfect immediately.
Of course, the Bitcoin vote up for grabs. Election 2024 collides with Bitcoin 2024. We're going to be right back with a new panel after our word from our sponsors. Stay with us.
The Bitcoin Conference. We started with a dream to build a community focused on Bitcoin. It all started in 2019 in the heart of San Francisco, the first major Bitcoin conference in years that kickstarted a revolution. And then Miami, a place where enthusiasts, developers, dreamers, and innovators could come together to make Bitcoin better. It has been an amazing 5-year thanks to all of you. Bitcoin Conference has become the largest premier global Bitcoin gathering in the world, leading hyper-Bitcoinization. While Miami was incredible, it was time to set the stage for Bitcoin in a new city. So we took the conference on the road. Nashville, Tennessee was the obvious choice, a city known for music and freedom. Next year, the conference is hitting the road again in search of the next global stage. We are headed to a new city next year. With hyper-Bitcoinization right around the corner, we have no plans to take the foot off the gas. Find out where we are headed next. Scan the QR code and be at the main stage for the big announcement.
So what is money and how does it get value? Paper money has value because someone says so. Bitcoin is different. It's like digital gold. It has value for many of the reasons gold does, but that's only the start. It has a limited supply, only 21 million, so no one can decide to just print more. Because no central authority controls it, it could be shut down. And unlike with banks and credit card companies, you don't need approval to use it. It puts the power back in all our hands. Bitcoin lets you control your finances. Kraken lets you buy Bitcoin. Kraken, see what crypto can be.
dollar will dramatically lose its purchasing power. The more they print, the more it gets diluted. Who it's good for is the people at the tippy top.
Because in order to keep the system going, they have to keep printing money.
And Bitcoin is that tool that allows us to beat the money printer.
Bitcoin is powerful in a way that is money that does not discriminate.
Bitcoin is built by the people for the people.
Why?
What's the second best? There is no second best.
We will ensure that the future of crypto and the future...
So yeah, today I'm talking about runes.
We're talking about runes.
The first.
Welcome back to the Mara News Desk, powered by Bitcoin Magazine. I'm your host, Pete Rizzo, editor of Bitcoin Magazine. It's the grand finale, the final day of Bitcoin 2024. The lines are around the venue as people pack in to see the big show, obviously. Donald J. Trump just hours away from speaking. We've got another panel to unpack all the news that has been happening on stage. To my far left, Perianne Boring, founder and CEO of the Digital Chamber, and to her right, Wiley Nickel. You saw him on stage earlier, U.S. representative from North Carolina. Wiley, I want to stick with you. The bipartisan letter coming out today, sorry, not bipartisan letter, but Democrats coming out today and saying, we want the party to change course on Bitcoin. Maybe introduce us to this letter.
Yeah, no, we announced it from the stage earlier. We've got 14 fellow members of House Democrats who signed on, some other good Democrats, but we're pitching for a reset with Vice President Harris. This is an exciting campaign, a new campaign. She's campaigning in her own right, so we want to see a reset and a focus on moving digital assets into the next decade.
So Perianne, you're obviously interfacing across Washington. This idea that Democrats are against Bitcoin and crypto, do you think that's a fair categorization?
Well, we've had a tough past couple of years, to be fair, Pete, but luckily we have champions like Wiley Nickel and many other Democrats serving in the House and the Senate and in seats all around the country that are pro-Bitcoin, that are pro-digital assets, and that want to make sure that Americans' access to these technologies is not restricted. So the Biden administration has clearly been extremely hostile to the crypto industry broadly, including Bitcoin and everybody else. I believe they've set the industry back over 10 years with their regulation by enforcement posture. At the Digital Chamber, we represent over 200 businesses that are building in this space, and a lot of those companies left the United States over the past couple of years. They've moved their operations either to the UAE, to Europe, Asia, Singapore, Hong Kong. Some of them have moved their entire families. I have one friend or one member that actually renounced their U.S. citizenship over this issue. But to be fair, there's many members within the Democratic Party that have always been pro-crypto. We're celebrating our 10-year anniversary this month. We've been on the ground working with policymakers in Washington, D.C. For a decade, and this really wasn't a partisan issue until recent years. This should be about technology. At the end of the day, this is happening, and the real question policymakers should be asking themselves is what country is it going to take off in? And we're fighting to make sure that the U.S. leads in the development of Bitcoin and blockchain technology.
Well, we had conservative activist Scott Pressler on earlier, and he was really making the case, how do you make change if you don't vote Republican? How can we trust that there will be change? Wiley, your response to that?
I can tell you 100%, if this becomes a partisan political football, it will set the industry back another decade. You will need to have only Republicans in Congress to get anything done. I led a group of 71 Democrats voting with my Republican colleagues in a bipartisan way. So if Donald Trump, when he talks later, wants to actually help, he needs to say, I want to do this with Democrats. Because if not, it's going to be this thing that ping-pongs back and forth. You're going to get someone maybe in the SEC who's better and someone who's not. And that's not helpful. We want to do this together. And if you care about the industry, if you want to have lasting success, to encourage digital innovation here in the United States, keep those jobs here, we've got to do it together. And that's the pitch I've been making, the point I've been making, and we've shown. And we've got Chuck Schumer in the Senate willing and ready to move on this. I think if you look at Congress, least productive Congress in our nation's history, we've done 3 must-pass bills, the budget, debt ceiling, Ukraine, Israel, supplemental funding. But the BIT21, we've done in a bipartisan way. This is our chance to do one big policy thing. It isn't a must-pass bill in the Congress. That's what we're working on.
Perry Ann, your reaction to the idea that a vote for change?
Republicans have largely been more open to Bitcoin and blockchain technology. At the end of the day, what's most important is that we have Canada's First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. It's considered free speech because it's a software language. So any effort to restrict people's access from being able to use a self-hosted wallet, any effort to prevent Bitcoin mining from happening in any state across the country, which New York passed the first Bitcoin ban in the country, these are setting legal precedents that are not just relevant if you care about Bitcoin. This is something that cares about all Americans. One of the biggest issues we've seen in public policy in the U.S. Congress, something we see covered in the mainstream media, is our First Amendment being in significant jeopardy due to online censorship, particularly on social media platforms. We're all familiar with that conversation. We are a branch of that same tree. So it's much bigger than just the Bitcoin community. This is an issue that all Americans should care about. And that's why I think everybody needs to show up in November and vote.
Well, of course, the data showing that Bitcoin is nonpartisan. I'm going to pull some data from a Harris DCG poll conducted in March found 33% of voters believe Bitcoin and crypto will factor into their choice of candidate. 77% expected their candidate will be knowledgeable about crypto, and roughly 20% of both Democrats and Republicans own crypto. I want to go back to you, Wiley. This idea that in a tough election where people are dug in and they know who they're voting for, that Bitcoin voters are a potential swing vote.
I agree 100%. I think there's well over 1 million single-issue voters just on digital assets, and this is a changing group of the electorate. And anyone who wants to win needs to understand that. I'm pushing hard for a reset with Vice President Harris's new campaign, and I'm hopeful we're going to see some a good forward-looking approach, but those voters are there, and we've got to talk about this issue. And if you look back at this in 10 years, people who are against Web3, it's going to be like you're saying you're against the internet, in the 90s. We got to. No, exactly. But in Congress with the folks I serve with, many of them are a lot older. It's about education. We got to educate people. No matter where they stand, if they understand the issue, the ones who really engage, the ones who dig in, those are the ones who supported the bipartisan bills we've done in Congress.
Well, we've got a quick hit coming from one of our roving reporters. I want to go back to you, Perry Ann, for just a second. This idea, Bitcoin, could it swing the election for one of the parties?
It absolutely could, and I'll share some additional statistics. In Ohio is a critical battleground. You have Sherrod Brown, who's the chairman of the Senate Banking Committee. He's a 30-year rank-and-file member, one of the most powerful members within the Democratic Party, has been ultimately working very closely with Senator Elizabeth Warren on anti-Bitcoin, anti-crypto policy. He's running against Bernie Moreno. Bernie Moreno is actually a former Digital Chamber
He was actually
member.
on the desk earlier today.
So he's running on a pro-crypto platform. He started a small technology company building in the blockchain space, and he's now running for office. In the 2020 election, 4.5 million people showed up to vote. And that was only 50% voter participation in Ohio. There are 2 million crypto owners in the state of Ohio. So if just a small fraction of those 2 million crypto people show up to vote, that could make the difference in one of the biggest and battleground states. It's estimated $200 to $300 million will be spent in Ohio in that particular election. So a part of it is voter participation, and the numbers are really in our favor. I believe crypto is the majority party. There's over 52 million Americans that own cryptocurrency today. 60% of them are millennials and Gen Z, and they're also more likely to be blacks and Latino Americans. These are areas where we need more participation from in the voting process. These are people who don't typically show up to vote, and if they show up, they 100% can have a massive impact. We are the majority. We just have to believe it and take action.
Well, Bitcoin voters out in force here. Bitcoin 2024 becoming home to election 2024. We're going to go out to roving reporter Isabella Santos. She's on the ground now talking to one of our speakers. We'll be right back after the break.
All right. First, I got to ask, what is the mission of Custodia Bank?
We're building a safe and sound bridge between the traditional and Bitcoin ecosystems that is compliant and meets the highest standards of bank regulation.
And so you had an ongoing, case. You were suing the Federal Reserve, and this year, they
brief and amicus, 7 amici came in, 7 amicus briefs. There are now 3 former U.S. Solicitors General involved in our case on our side, including people who usually face off against each other. The Solicitors General for Obama and Bush, and they're both on our side, along with a former Solicitor General of Virginia, all lined up against the Fed. The Fed's brief is due at the end of August.
At the end of August, so we have to stay tuned with that. And for those of you that don't understand what's happening, can you give us a little scoop of what happened? Why did you decide to sue? Because it's been a long time.
It has been a long time, and it's wrong, and it's protectionist. It's the banking industry trying to keep competitors out, and the regulators aiding the industry in doing so. It's wrong. But we were working, the state of Wyoming actually was working with the Fed on creating a new type of bank charter to safely service the digital asset. It is a non-lending charter. One of the problems with Silvergate and Signature, and one of the reasons they failed, is you cannot mix leverage and the deposits in the Bitcoin space, and that's part of the reason those banks failed. And so this was a charter designed to service the industry, and literally the hot money night, Michael Barr at the Fed, who made the decision to deny Custodia 2 weeks after FTX had failed, and then he had a meeting, and then within a couple of days the first draft of the denial letter appeared.
So what is money and how does it get value? Paper money has value because someone says so. Bitcoin is different. It's like digital gold. It has value for many of the reasons gold does, but that's only the start. It has a limited supply, only 21 million, so no one can decide to just print more. Because no central authority controls it, it can never be shut down. Unlike with banks and credit card companies, you don't need approval to use it. It puts the power back in all our hands. Bitcoin lets you Kraken, lets you buy Bitcoin. Kraken, see what crypto can be.
Welcome back to the Mara News Desk, powered by Bitcoin Magazine. I'm your host, Pete Rizzo, editor of Bitcoin Magazine. The grand finale of Bitcoin 2024, Day 2, happening now. We're less than 2 hours away from Donald J. Trump, 45th President of the United States, taking the stage, making history here at Bitcoin 2024. We've got a new panel here to discuss the news, the highlights, what's going on. Cabot Phillips, senior editor at Daily Wire. To his left, Mike Germano, president of Bitcoin Magazine. And Cabot, I want to start with you. Your first Bitcoin conference. Obviously, it seems Donald Trump is bringing media here.
Yeah, I did not know what to expect coming in. And I'm going to be honest, I have been blown away. I talked to Mike the week beforehand, and he was telling me it's going to be wild. There's going to be a lot of media there, tens of thousands of people. This exceeded everything. I've heard people promote their events before, and I get there, and it's always underwhelming.
Talk to us about that energy.
This is overwhelming. This is completely overwhelming what we're seeing. And I think the amount of media attention that the event has garnered, there was going to be media here regardless. But President Trump being here has brought a completely new element. There are hundreds of outlets here. I'm seeing reporters from every single major outlet as well as independent outlets like the Daily Wire. And I think it's hard to quantify the excitement that there is to hear from potentially the next president of the United States, a guy who has really become more friendly to cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin after 2018, 2019, saying he wasn't a fan. And I think he's realizing just how many voters are actually being swayed by this issue and are looking for a candidate that's going to speak to it.
Mike, can you talk about this media deluge? Who's here, who's new at the Bitcoin conference?
Yeah, so once again, with President Trump coming in, and especially after his announcement, we saw a massive uptick in media that requested passes. So right now we have 912 registered press that's in attendance. That's actually bigger than most Bitcoin conferences or events themselves. So, it's important for us. We also have a very important role when the press is coming. This is a great on the main stage, but also to inform them. And so even when President Trump is speaking, having a spin room, talking to the press, because if you looked at in the past, press hasn't always been nice to the Bitcoin conference, right? Whether that was in Miami when in 2021 during COVID, when we allowed people to go maskless and without vax cards, they were kind of negative, or the fact that they don't understand our audience. And sometimes that's why we make sure we go out of our way to invite as much press as we can to this event, for them to see it firsthand, for them to actually experience and understand. When they look around, they go, that doesn't look like Bitcoiners look like.
Cabot, let's talk about your audience. Talking about Mike's talking about Bitcoiners, what they look like. What kind of questions does your audience have? Are they believers?
Yeah, I think there's definitely an overlap with the conservative audience, which Daily Wire, which we work with and appeal to. The thing that I'm hearing from a lot of the attendees who've stopped by our booth said, oh, we love Daily Wire. And I said, what's the crossover? Why are you here? The big thing I keep hearing is freedom. They say, I know that the government is trying to get their hands on my money. There's been a lot of concern over central bank digital currency. They see the way that the government is going, trying to get their hands on everything. And they say, Bitcoin is freedom for me. And I think that there's this awareness growing where people look around. With inflation in the last few years, they say, I could be as frugal and as wise with my money as I want, and the government could still take my money through inflation. What are alternatives that are going to protect me from that? I think that's a deeply conservative message of freedom, of getting away from government control. And that's what we're hearing from our audience, and also viewing it as an alternative for them where they can have the freedom to buy things without the government looking over their shoulder. I've had multiple people bring up what's going on in China with the digital currency that the government there is backing, saying what you can and cannot buy. And they view it as not only an exciting new technology, but also they view it as sort of a preventative measure for government overreach, where they're saying, I want to be proactive. But the big thing that stuck out to me this week has been how mainstream Bitcoin has really become. There's a saying in politics, nothing moves unless pushed. And I think that the Bitcoin community has pushed the media and it's pushed elected officials to pay attention to this, because they're realizing they have to, because so many tens of millions of Americans are on board.
I want to stick with the word you said there, alternative. Mike, a lot of alternative media coming here. And what does it say about media in general that independent media is here at the Bitcoin conference, and maybe some of the majors are not yet here?
Well, I guess the majors are here. So that's one of the things that, Trump brought in, is now all of a sudden ABC, NBC, Bloomberg, Fox. Maybe we didn't give them space on the floor because they didn't deserve it yet. But our entire media row, there's a whole floor downstairs with all of them there. And luckily for us, we kind of have a weird role as Bitcoin Magazine, because we are a media outlet as well. But trying to inform the media that, hey, look, this is some information. Media is used to getting a press release or working with a PR department for a major. Bitcoin doesn't have that. So being decentralized, there's no one feeding the media, hey, this is some information you need to know, here's how to talk to our PR person, can we book them time on your show? So it's really unique for us in a decentralized way to try to help push the Bitcoin narrative and say, please come here for yourself, meet with everyone. We want to make this a stage that everybody can talk to and all these media outlets can talk to hear more about what is happening in Bitcoin.
Of course, Bitcoin Magazine, a media outlet as well. The privacy issue of Bitcoin Magazine on newsstands. Now, Kevin, I want to talk about misinformation, right? Yeah. The idea that media is informing people properly. Your thoughts on just media attitudes to Bitcoin? What was your past exposure to this?
It's been interesting. So I talked to a lot of elected officials, and back in 2017, 18, 19, there wasn't a lot of awareness from them about what this issue was. And so because they were talking about it, the media thought, well, I don't really need to talk about this. And they were able to pigeonhole Bitcoin as this fringe topic that doesn't really need to be discussed. Once the elected officials started realizing, for good or bad, we need to actually look at legislating this, or we need to deregulate what's going on here and get out of it. Once the elected officials started doing that, I think the media followed. And I actually think the media attention is a very good thing for Bitcoiners for this reason. When the politicians are able to operate in the dark, they love nothing more. They do not want the general public being aware of what they're doing. And so we've seen in the last 3 years, the Biden administration take issue with cryptocurrency, specifically Bitcoin, trying to target it, trying to make it harder to access. And a lot of people were not even aware of what was going on. You've got tens of millions of Americans invested in Bitcoin who maybe weren't even aware that people like Elizabeth Warren and others were trying to crack down on it. With this media attention, we always say light is the best disinfectant. With this media, what is my senator doing on this? What is my presidential candidate doing on this? And I think that is helpful. Now the question becomes if the media covers it fairly. Right. I think none of us trust the legacy mainstream media outlets to do a fair job of covering what Bitcoin is all about and the legislative issue there. But I do think that for the Bitcoin community.
Mike, your quick thoughts before a word from our sponsors.
Yep. We've now seen the Bitcoin conference evolve to when you Google this entire week, everyone is making all their major Bitcoin announcements. It's not just the president, it's making Bitcoin announcements. Whether it's Ferrari accepting Bitcoin, or I believe Michigan just bought $5 million of Bitcoin.
Multiple pension funds, Jersey City, Michigan.
They're all making these announcements this week because they know the press is saying this is the week that we're going to talk about Bitcoin. This is all happening. So even the momentum itself of this event causes all the press to want to talk about it and everyone to make all their major announcements. These people aren't even making these announcements at our stage, which I want to point out, we welcome anyone. If you have a big Bitcoin announcement next year, please come to us. We'd love to have you on here. We'd love to promote it.
I'm going to make a Bitcoin announcement right now.
Yes.
The Daily Wire is accepting Bitcoin for
You're
memberships.
putting your treasury into
I can't don't hold me to that, but I would like to make
Ben said it's okay. Ben said it's okay. Perfect. Yeah. So hopefully, look, we were happy to have you here. Daily Wire, the rest of the press, thank you for coming to.
This is Mara, taking Bitcoin mining to the cutting edge of energy solutions. We're monetizing excess hydro energy in Paraguay, turning waste into value by reducing landfill emissions, and recycling data center heat to warm communities in Finland. With Mara, we're building the base layer of a sustainable future. To learn more, visit mara.com.
So what is money and how does it get value? Paper money has value because someone says so. Bitcoin is different. It's like digital gold. It has value for many of the reasons gold does, but that's only the start. It has a limited supply, only 21 million, so no one can decide to just print more because no central authority can.
Better. It has been an amazing 5 years and thanks to all of you. Bitcoin Conference has become the largest premier global Bitcoin gathering in the world, leading hyper-Bitcoinization. While Miami was incredible, it was time to set the stage for Bitcoin in a new city. So we took the conference on the road. Nashville, Tennessee was the obvious choice, a city known for music and freedom. Next year, the conference is hitting the road again in search of the next global stage. We are headed to a new city next year. With hyper-Bitcoinization right around the corner, we have no plans to take the foot off the gas. Find out where we are headed next. Scan the QR code and be at the main stage for the big announcement.
Dollar will dramatically lose its purchasing power. The more they print, the more it gets diluted. Who it's good for is the people at the tippy top.
Because in order to keep the system going, they have to keep printing money.
And Bitcoin is that tool that allows us to beat the money printer.
Bitcoin is powerful in a way that is money that does not discriminate.
Bitcoin is built by the people for the people.
Welcome back to the Mara Live Desk, everybody. We are here at Bitcoin 2024, presented by Bitcoin Magazine. We are just about an hour away from President Trump speaking. We are here joined by Alex Gladstein, the Chief Strategy Officer of the Human Rights Foundation. Alex, thank you so much for joining us. You just got off the main stage. You were talking a bit about mining, educating the audience about mining. Could you tell us a little bit about what you talked about?
Sure. Well, happy to be here and honored to get the opportunity to be up on the main stage with so many other luminaries. This week's been amazing. The content I've seen, the things that are happening, the world is changing, and we're right here for it. We got front row seats. We got the former President of the United States about to speak, which we'll get to. Yesterday, here and also at Bitcoin Park and other places, there was so much going on. I saw a panel with the governor of Tennessee, someone from the Tennessee Valley Authority, and a senator talking about how they're going to make Tennessee this nuclear mining capital, basically. Beautiful. And they're expanding nuclear, and they're going to use Bitcoin mining to help bootstrap that. It's unbelievable. And got so much good content. Obviously, RFK, that was very interesting. Look, we all know he's not going to be president, but look, Bitcoin's about memes. And he. Well, the funny thing is, it was a Kennedy that was more bullish than any Bitcoin podcaster has ever been, even jokingly.
Yep.
He gets up there and he explains that he would buy 4 million Bitcoin. I mean, it's like that's the new meme, though.
It is.
That's the new bar. It's moving the Overton window.
This is true. Could I actually ask you a quick question about that? We had Femi Longe, who just joined your organization.
Yes.
You announced that this weekend. He was on the desk earlier.
Okay.
And he was actually saying, he shared his thoughts on that. And he was saying maybe it's not so great that America acquires all this Bitcoin, right?
And they're not. Like, they're not going to, even the idea of buying that much, they're not going to get there. But, you know, whether or not it's good or not is not really for us to decide. I mean, we have to just sort of deal with it. It's going to be the evolution of Bitcoin as it monetizes from zero, from an idea, into the global reserve currency of choice for everybody in the world. And that's just the journey we're on. And, you know, at the beginning, it was just computer programmers and people operating on the Silk Road who realized it was valuable. And then over time, human rights activists and environmentalists and journalists. And now you have Wall Street, and now you have nation-state mining, and you have nation-state adoption, and now you have the leaders of the most powerful country in the world. So this is just the journey. And there's a great Alan Farrington essay on this called Wittgenstein's Money.
Yep.
And it's talking about, well, what would it, you know, one thing I bet most Bitcoiners can get behind.
Yep.
Let us use Bitcoin as a currency. Don't buy it. You know, you don't need to buy it. They'll be forced to buying it eventually. Yep. They'll mine it, they'll buy it. They'll use Bitcoin mining to balance power loads and to bring us into the future of energy. But the most important thing is just let us be. Yep. You know, let us use freedom money. Yep. And, you know, that's the best thing they could do. Yep. That's the best thing the U.S. government could do is just let us use it as currency.
Yeah, I agree 100%. You just mentioned, you talked about balancing power loads. So that's a bit of a technical term that's associated with Bitcoin mining. Could you dive into that a little bit more?
Yeah, well, in my speech, I talked about how I had my eyes opened by journey to different countries in Africa last year when I went with Gridless, amazing team, Eric, Janet, Philip.
Shout out.
And what you learn is that countries like Malawi, only 11% of people have electricity. And, you know, essentially, there is no one working on that. There's no one who's like going to bring them all online. There's no capitalistic incentive that makes sense. Most of the power infrastructure in rural Africa, rural places around the world, this changes everything with Bitcoin mining. And we were visiting these sites where it's like, okay, you're in a micro hydro, which is like a small turbine powering a village from running water in a river in a remote location. And you have to understand there's no grid to sell the excess energy to. So at night, the village sleeps.
Yep.
They have no power demand, basically none. The river never sleeps. So it's like you have this wasted, gridless is making money, and the people are paying less for their power.
Yep.
This is a little paradoxical for most people. They're like, wait, a drag on the network and are making things expensive. No, that's a lie. It's actually the opposite. Because now the power company can sell 100% of what it produces, it can charge less.
Yep.
So you're going to see this price of power drop. It's really amazing.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And in Malawi too, I think I read something in one of the essays that you wrote on this. There's further this is leading to more electrification in these areas, and as you just said, at a cheaper rate as well. Could you dive a little bit more into that if possible?
Well, I mean, look, just in that example, now that we have Bitcoin mining, the power company can afford to go build enough to connect more homes. And they're going to do it out of their own self-interest. They're not going to do it for altruistic reasons. You don't need Bill Gates or the UN or Warren Buffett to come in and make a big donation. No, we don't need to wait for that. If we relied on that, these people would live in darkness forever.
Yeah.
This is going to make it happen for people around the world who don't have access to electricity. Because the crazy irony is most of them live in a place of massive abundance.
Yep.
Solar, wind, geothermal, biomass, all around them. And they can't harness it because they never had a way to align incentives before.
Yep.
Bitcoin changes everything on that front. And it's not just in, I talked about how it's not just in sort of poorer countries where this is going to happen. It's happening in advanced democracies too.
Yep.
I mean, look at my state of California. I was showing how much we waste every year. The UK government wastes, they spend hundreds of millions of dollars every year wasting wind energy. Bitcoin fixes that so dramatically. Now it's going to pay you instead of you paying it. It's just so transformative.
New paradigm.
It does, it's hard for people to swallow because they've been lied to for a decade plus by the government and the media, which has been telling them that Bitcoin is dangerous and risky. The reality is it's not, and it's really good for us, and it's really good for the planet. It's going to make more green power,
Yep.
and it's going to have more electricity per capita for everybody, and that's how you advance civilization. I used a chart that showed basically income per capita versus electricity consumption per capita.
Yep.
You don't want to be down here. You want to be up here. And the only way to get from down here to up here is to use more electricity. I showed case examples of South Korea and Vietnam, and as they used more electricity, they got richer. It's very basic.
Yeah.
And Bitcoin is a technology that can help us bring the 4 billion people who don't have a whole lot of electricity, or none at all, and bring them up and to the right, which is really the most important thing we can do as humans, because without power, you don't have health, you don't have wealth, you don't have civilization. So this is how we advance, is to use more power, and Bitcoin's going to help us do that. And the final thing I'll just say is that, there's an important distinction between fossils and renewables, because fossils are more modular. Like we don't really waste a whole lot of them. I mean, we can talk about flaring, but generally speaking, like when there's less demand, they dig less out of the ground.
Right.
Okay, and that's not how, it's up to God. There's whatever. There's wind, there's sun, like we don't control it. Bitcoin buys, all of what's produced.
Yeah.
And then, the demand is the demand, and Bitcoin just
amazing. Yeah.
So that's the idea.
We appreciate that. Thank you for the breakdown. Also, use this term aligned incentives, which is often used in Bitcoin. So when people have the same incentives, this word alignment has come up a lot since we've been here. There's a large contingent, I think, of conservatives here, obviously to see President Trump, and there's this alignment of incentives with conservatives purport to support more. Purport to support more financial privacy, more financial freedom. Bitcoin purports to foster these things as well. But on the other side of things, I'm kind of curious as to what you think about this. We have to talk about financial inclusion and other things that Bitcoin provides as well. So I'm curious, your thoughts on Trump, and then also, are the Democrats eventually going to come on board?
Well, we don't know. We don't know what Trump's going to say. I mean, of course, the rumors here are that he doesn't want to be upstaged by RFK, who came out with this wildly bullish sort of idea. So we'll see. I mean, that's interesting. I think taking politics out of it, it's remarkable that the former president of the United States is going to come give a speech at the Bitcoin conference. Just completely, I mean, it doesn't matter what party they're in. Like, that is insane. 10 years ago, a time traveler probably would not have believed you.
Yeah.
We went from being, 3 years ago, really excited about the smaller Latin American country that, frankly, most Americans haven't really heard of, to the former president of the United States. Like, that is a freaking leap year advance, step function advance. Now we're there. Now we had Kamala's team debating. She ended up not coming. The point is, it's now Bitcoin is in the national conversation. It's not going anywhere.
Yep.
And the folks at BPI do such a good job making that the case. And their summit in DC every spring is so important to support and to attend, where we can help educate our lawmakers. And again, adopt Bitcoin.
Agreed, yeah.
So let's push the government to the side. They're probably not going to buy a lot of Bitcoin. That's fine. We may not even want them to Femi's point. Maybe we want other countries to accumulate it. We'll see. What we definitely don't want them to do is to go after developers making Bitcoin more usable as a currency and more private.
Yeah. Can I put a pin in that one? I think we're gonna dive right back into Bitcoin and privacy right after this.
Perfect.
We're going to cut to Q again. I'm here with Alex Gladstein from the Human Rights Foundation. We're here at Bitcoin 2024. Don't go anywhere. Over to you, Q.
Thanks, guys. I'm down in the expo hall, and as I've said all day, all week, we have some incredible different booths as well as some experiences. Borisov Tunnel. Don't kill me, Core Scientific. I'm sorry if that's not how I pronounce it. But it's walking you through essentially how to harness energy for Bitcoin mining, what the future of that looks like. But look, if anyone out there's got a shroom chocolate and wants to sit here and discuss the future of humanity the way this video does, I'd be open to it. Back to you guys at the desk.
Welcome back, everybody. We're here at the Mara Live Desk. We're here at Bitcoin 2024. We have about an hour until President Trump speaks. To my left, I have Pete Rizzo, host extraordinaire. He's sitting to my left here. He'll be part of this panel here. Yeah, and we have Alex Gladstein, Chief Strategy Officer of the Human Rights Foundation. Alex, we were just talking off camera a bit about privacy, the importance of privacy, and quite an interesting conversation you had the other day with someone, an early advocate for privacy on the internet.
Yeah, so a couple things. First of all, a brilliant move by you guys to do this in Tennessee. The amount of interaction with the Tennessee lawmakers has been extraordinary. I mean, I watched conversations with the governor yesterday, with senators, talking about how they're going to use Bitcoin mining to harness the excess nuclear power that they're building out here. But something else that was very interesting that happened was I was on a panel with the Attorney General of Tennessee, and we were talking about the attacks on Bitcoin developers, which really are a continuation of the crypto wars from the early 90s, right, where Phil Zimmerman, who took the stage the other day, which was amazing. I got to meet him. I just was like, thank you very much for putting everything on the line back then. It's happening again, and it's happening to people who are developing open source tools like Samurai. And we had Zach Shapiro from BPI on the panel with Matt Odell and myself. We're discussing this, and he was very bullish on Tennessee pushing back against the federal government on these things and providing a framework to protect open source development related to Bitcoin privacy. And it's very important if Tennessee is willing to do that, because they can create briefs and they can push forward and make frameworks that then the government has to respond to. So he's basically committed to that. I watched this happen live. So the Tennessee government is now going to work with BPI to challenge attacks on Bitcoin developers. And that is an incredible, that's the single outcome of this conference that's amazing. And of course it's not.
Bouncing off what Alex saying, really, I mean, this is cypherpunk values going into mainstream politics, right? You said Phil Zimmerman, a veteran of the crypto wars, man, wow, that he's on stage here speaking at a Bitcoin conference, and how important it is to kind of bridge this history, right? Bitcoin magazine host sometimes, and then a historian on Twitter and on X, if you follow me there. I kind of go into the cypherpunk history, and just bouncing off what you said, the cypherpunks really were a political group, right, in the 90s in California, and they were really activated by this idea that, in a digital age, we wouldn't have privacy. You read people like Hal Finney, like Phil Zimmerman. They were worried about many of the issues that we see today and that politicians are now responding to, and essentially it was this lack of privacy in the digital age, and now we have Bitcoin, the digital cash, hopefully bringing more privacy to our financial lives. But obviously the case of William Hill and Kiana Rodriguez and the Samurai developers chilling because they're important that there's political engagement, even as there's worries about partisanship at the conference.
I appreciate all that context, Pete, and I actually want to touch on this while you're here, Alex, especially why is privacy important, especially to the people that you work with in the human rights field?
Well, when we talked with the AG, of Tennessee down here, what was super interesting was that we discussed the idea of, is it American to go after a blacksmith if the knife that he made was used in a crime? No, of course not. You go after the criminal. So, that's what is happening now. They're going after the blacksmith for somebody else's crime, and it's not American. Now, it might be what they do in Europe or China or somewhere else, but it's nice to see that there are American officials willing to step up to that. And the way that it connects with the work, very important. Now, due to historical coincidence, essentially, or the values and virtues we have in Western society, a lot of the privacy tools were made here, okay? We don't actually know who Satoshi Nakamoto was, but they were probably in an advanced democracy of some kind. It seems likely. And obviously, Hal Finney and many others were in America or Europe who helped to build, who make a very effective Lightning wallet, pulled out of the U.S. market due to concerns that maybe they could get sued, which is really depressing that the U.S. government is creating that environment. Like, we should be getting people to come here to build. We should be encouraging entrepreneurship and innovation, and instead we're on a short list of, like, North Korea and Turkmenistan for countries that can't use Phoenix. So, we can change that, and if we don't, it sucks for human rights activists globally, because all of a sudden their ability to use Phoenix as they're traveling gets limited, and it's just not, it sucks. So what we want to do is help the officials here, and BPI does such a good job of this, understand that they can play a role in defending human rights for everybody by making America a place that people can come and build Bitcoin tools. Like, of course, I think this is very important from the mining perspective, but we also have to build Bitcoin here.
Right.
Right?
I was going to say, I think Samurai should be exciting, right? This is something that I think we should want to build, right? This is simply a tool that takes a transaction, accepts it, and then you are able to withdraw the same amount of cryptocurrency that you put in. It's simply a service that kind of moves cryptocurrency, or in this case Bitcoin, around. Obviously there's some privacy benefits, but this tool doesn't require a central operator, yet the operators are being accused of money laundering, which is that they are a company, even though this is simply their code, their speech, right? And as we've seen in the U.S. law, there is this precedent that code is speech, right? And I think it's important that that gets upheld.
Appreciate that. Appreciate the context, and also the fact that the developers of Samurai Wallet were never actually touching customer funds, yet they're being charged as a money service business. Quite intense. Pete, you're the Bitcoin historian. You've been covering crypto full time, or Bitcoin and crypto full time for over a decade. Have you ever seen anything
Don't say it like that.
Have you ever seen anything that has had this sort of chilling effect, or that has developers so nervous?
Well, I think we've been in a series of chilling effects, right? We haven't talked about it, but the China migration. China earlier we was talking to Scott Pressler, conservative commentator, about this, and he was curious about China, right? And China, of course, had a tremendous advantage, right? This was a country where, because of their ability to produce mining chips or computer chips, just generally, 60-70% of the global mining power, again, these are the machines that are competing to produce new Bitcoins, were consolidated in the country, and rather than embracing it, rather than using this really as a tool to advance their own country, they simply they banned this industry and sent their miners abroad, and that's why there are so very interesting to see Donald Trump kind of seize on that opportunity. But yeah, when you take this perspective, I think it's important to remember that Bitcoin exists in this geopolitical way, and that we've seen just hostility from so many places in China right now. Even if you're a CEO of a cryptocurrency or Bitcoin company, there in many cases they can't travel, right? So there's this idea that Bitcoin might face kind of some overreach in America, but this has already happened, right? China really was, did take such a negative attitude, and I think, maybe it hasn't been as bad in America, but it can get better, right? We've seen businesses struggle to get banking, startups that were debanked, right? So there hasn't been a level playing field, and I think that's what the industry is calling for. It merely just wants to compete against existing financial services.
Appreciate that. And in that context, so there hasn't been a level playing field, and you're talking about what's been important here in America, things that we've upheld, or the idea that things can get better here in America. In a place like China, maybe we don't expect. Alex, from what you're seeing around the world, you're one of the people who have sort of made it, I think, more public knowledge that it's the exception, not the rule, to live in a liberal democracy.
Sure.
So there's authoritarian regimes around the world. How much of what comes out of America is not only going to influence other liberal democracies, but other leaders, what they're going to see from America on Bitcoin, maybe the broader crypto space as as well, and how is that going to affect things worldwide?
Well, in the earliest days of Bitcoin, my organization, HRF, was involved in something called SOPA PIPA, which was what the U.S. government was trying to do, was basically allow corporations to start censoring the internet. And one of the fears we had, because we don't really work on domestic policy, but we were afraid that this would create a chilling effect where dictators would say, oh, look, America's doing that, so we're going to do it too. So basically, whatever we do gets copied by everybody else. So like any sort of financial restrictions we have may get sort of dispersed through FATF and these other sort of alphabet soup organizations to dictators globally. So we are still, I know that we're not quite the city on the hill maybe we used to be, but like we matter a lot. And like what we do really carries weight around the world. And look, at the end of the day, I want to push back against this idea that that a lot of sadly people sort of maybe on the Democrat side have that Bitcoin's like bad for America. This is sort of what Elizabeth Warren pushes, literally issue credits that buy oil. I mean, that has major benefits, but you know, a lot of that is tied up in a system that does a lot of exploitation of other people, and I think, you know, globally, and I think that if we move to a system where we're more collaborative with the rest of the world, we'll actually be stronger. So this is sort of my thesis, is that America is going to be really dynamic in a Bitcoin world, and if you look around, yes, okay, it's going to be really rough for the CCP if the people have more power over the economy. That's going to be really bad for them. But it's not going to be bad for Nashville. It's not going to be bad for Tennessee.
I think the way that I would look at this question is, what does America gain from being against this invention, right? It is an invention. Bitcoin exists. It's out there in the world. It's a neutral, apolitical monetary system. What does America gain, right? We've seen our smartest people go abroad. Those companies move abroad. And we've seen that the industry has been held back, perhaps even from its full potential. And what does its full potential mean? Well, it obviously means jobs. It means innovation. I mean, look at how many companies are here. I mean, there's has to be at least 100 companies here on the floor.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's absolutely right. So, and in these businesses right now, even 12, 16 months ago, we're thinking, hey, like, we should move outside of America. Right, so from merely an economic perspective, it's hard to see what the U.S. gains from sticking with its current policy.
Well, can I push back a little bit on that if you don't mind, Pete? So we have dollar hegemony around the world, right? The dollar is the global reserve currency. There's maybe some fear that maybe Bitcoin might replace that one day. Do you think that factors into some of the political decisions that are being made right now?
Well, I don't think it's reached the level of political discourse where they're aware of it. I've had several conversations on this desk today where this has kind of come up, right? This natural competition between Bitcoin and the dollar. Of course, in the Bitcoin space, we believe that Bitcoin competes with the dollar, should compete with the dollar, that it will compete with the dollar. And I think we want to move away from the U.S. financial system as it's currently constructed because of all the great writing that Alex Gladstein does. You can go to bitcoinmagazine.com, and he talks about all of the, really like terrible nature of the system in terms of like what it takes to actually operate a global reserve currency for the U.S. dollar to maintain that status. Is that a conversation that Donald Trump is having backstage right now, where he's with a roundtable of industry executives? I don't know. I can't answer that question.
It is a conversation his vice president pick is having.
Oh, okay.
J.D. Vance has talked at length. He even questioned Jay Powell, head of the Fed, on this on the record last year. There's a video of it. You should watch it. And he's basically saying, you know what? Like, isn't it bad for the average American that we have the reserve currency? Doesn't it make it really hard for us to make things in a competitive way? Hasn't it hollowed out our industrial base? Hasn't it brought the plague of drug addiction to our people? And the Fed chair is basically like, yeah. So this is the externality of being the reserve currency that we don't often talk about. I mean, a lot of people know that it's bad for other countries.
Yes.
But a lot of people don't realize it's bad for the average American.
Yeah. So the strength of the dollar, obviously, it's something that makes exports more expensive. Is that what you're getting at? So when we send things abroad, we don't have as much money coming into the country as a result. Just to clarify.
Because the dollar's so strong,
right?
We can't make stuff that's competitive on global markets.
Right.
So it all goes to China or wherever else. And it means that, essentially, our manufacturing base gets totally hollowed out, and now we're dependent on all these countries for all this important stuff. We're kind of paralyzed. And so if we can weaken the dollar, which this is what J.D. Vance and some of Trump's economic advisors want to do, they want to weaken the dollar and devalue the dollar like we did in the 80s to try and combat what was going on with Japan and the rivalry with Japan. We forced Japan to appreciate its currency so that they stopped becoming... We didn't want them to become the #1 power in the world.
That's right.
And they were threatening to become one, and we said no, and we had the Plaza Accords and all this stuff. We basically forced Japan to strengthen its currency so it became less competitive so that we could sell more stuff.
Perfect.
And that's going to happen again. That's what they're proposing, is to devalue. Now, what do you want to hold in that situation? You probably want to hold Bitcoin.
I appreciate that, and that's a perfect note to end on. We are going to cut over to Q again. I was sitting here with Pete Rizzo, the Bitcoin historian, on X. Also, as I said, news desk host extraordinaire, and Alex Gladstein, Chief Strategy Officer for the Human Rights Foundation. Alex, thank you so much for your work. Pete, thank you so much. Cutting over to you, Q. Let's go.
Thanks, Frank. I am down on the expo hall with my dear friend, Uncle Rockstar. He is a contributor to BTC Pay Server as well as Nostr. And what we wanted to spend some time talking about is a hot button issue. It is going to be talked about during Trump's speech, as well as been talked about and discussed all throughout this conference and weeks and months leading up to it. And it's around Ross Ulbricht.
Yes, and from my perspective, it's going to be talked until the election day, and then after the election day, because Donald Trump promised that if he's elected, that he will free Ross. So we're all waiting for that.
Right, and for those who maybe are not as aware of who Ross is, Ross was the creator of Silk Road, who has been now in jail for how many years?
Man, it's been what, like over a decade, and it's crazy that you get jail time just for creating a free market. Really, his biggest contribution to Bitcoin, in my view, was about applying the technology that Bitcoin is and ensuring that we can use it for transactions, and to create a free market and then get a jail sentence, 2 lifetimes. It's crazy, man.
It is insane to watch this transpire, but also at the same time, it is incredible to see that this is now becoming a conversation that we're seeing presidential candidates having in real time. I know you helped create something special to commemorate this moment. Do you want to try to share with the audience to talk a little bit about this?
I was showing it yesterday on the air, but I'm showing it again because I've been helping with Bitcoin payments here at the conference. So besides those great free Ross t-shirts that you can pick up for free, they're available next to the merch store. Let's go. Let me help you. Boom.
Free Ross, day one.
Yeah. Besides that, there is Laserite cards that you can use to pay here with Bitcoin at the conference. We can't promote as much as talk to a girl, you and me, but we gotta try our best. And yeah, free Ross day one.
We're gonna hawk to a little bit of Bitcoin onto that card. Frank, we're gonna head back to you guys at the desk.
Yeah.
So what is money and how does it get value? Paper money has value because someone says so. Bitcoin is different. It's like digital gold. It has value for many of the reasons gold does, but that's only the start. It has a limited supply, only 21 million, so no one can decide to just print more. Because no central authority controls it, it can never be shut down. And unlike with banks and credit card companies, you don't need approval to use it. It puts the power back in all our hands. Bitcoin lets you control your finances. Kraken lets you buy Bitcoin. Kraken, see what crypto can be.
The Bitcoin Conference. We started with a dream to build a community focused on Bitcoin. It all started in 2019 in the heart of San Francisco, the first major Bitcoin conference in years that kickstarted a revolution. And then